Chapter 1294. Songju had already left, so it was impossible for him to hide in the dark. So, sometimes the most terrifying thing in the world was to scare yourself. When the heavenly palace-crowned prince's face turned blue and he knew he was in danger, the truth was that his eldest senior brother and 1,000 faces didn't even glance at him. The mysterious cultivator was their little junior brother. Since they were sure of this, their attitude towards this matter immediately changed. No matter what, nothing could happen to him. This was what their eldest senior brother thought, and so did the 1,000 faces. But she was even more worried because her eldest senior brother was injured. Perhaps she should help her eldest senior brother. Before she could step forward, her eldest senior brother seemed to have sensed something. He turned to look at her and said, "No need." The silver roots drilled into the giant's body. The giant seemed to receive a powerful supplement. The wounds on its body rapidly healed, and the 2 missing heads and 3 arms were also restored. With the will to die, it no longer had any scruples. The aura it erupted with now wasn't any weaker than when it was in a state of complete victory. Seeing the eldest senior brother standing in front of it, the 3-headed and 6-armed giant didn't care about the Peach Garden's head disciple or anything like that. It didn't care that they had a garden master who was very protective and had a bad reputation. It lifted a hand and punched out. Space suddenly shook, as if a towering mountain had fallen into the sea. Terrifying waves instantly erupted, sweeping in all directions. The eldest senior brother reached out a hand and grasped it. Qin Yu discovered that the head disciple of the Peach Garden was a swordsman. He hadn't sensed this before. As he was surprised, his heart suddenly shrank. A trace of fear erupted from the bottom of his heart like a volcano. The eldest senior brother was not only a swordsman, but perhaps one of the most terrifying swordsman masters in the world. Because the moment he attacked with his sword, everything seemed to be cut apart. Whether it was the obstacles in front of him or the world itself, nothing could contend with it. The giant roared in pain. The space created by its punch was directly cut apart. Then the sword didn't stop. It fell straight on its body, tearing apart a large piece of flesh and blood. The terrifying wound it formed pierced through its chest and abdomen. One could clearly see that the countless silver roots in its body were cut apart by the sword edge. Then they emerged from the wound, wrapping around the torn flesh and forcibly closing the wound. But within the torn flesh and blood, there were still remnants that hadn't completely dissipated. The sword intent that had completely dissipated had barely managed to grow back together when it cracked again. Fresh blood flowed freely. The giant roared even more painfully. Its wound burst open again, triggering the release of the sword intent, which stimulated its senses and aroused its ferocity. Death could arrive at any moment. It no longer had anything to lose. Killing Qin Yu was the last thing it could do for the ancient creature race. No one could stop it. Whoever dared would die together. The giant no longer paid any attention to it. A thick and dazzling silver light suddenly erupted from the horrifying wound on its chest. This was the power of space. Rumble! A huge rumble rang out across the entire world. Following that, terrifying cracks appeared and spread out in all directions. Each one of them contained a heart-palpitating aura. That was the condensation of the destructive power of space. Roar! With a loud roar, it was like a rain of black sabers. Black cracks filled the skies as they crazily cut towards Qin Yu. The eldest senior brother frowned slightly. He retreated and raised his hand. The tip of his sword instantly slashed through the crack in space, splitting it into 2. Without stopping, the eldest senior brother turned around and slashed again. The second spatial crack shattered under the blade of his sword. He turned behind Qin Yu and continued to slash out a 3rd time. The 1,000-faced assassin revealed a look of praise. In this world, perhaps only the eldest senior brother could cut apart these spatial cracks with his non-saint Tao cultivation. But at the same time, there was a bit of worry in his eyes. This was because this sort of extraordinary eruption of power was a tremendous burden even for the eldest senior brother. Moreover, he had forcefully resisted the explosion of a true saint's Tao accumulations and had already suffered considerable injuries. His eyes turned and fell on the heavenly palace's crown prince. The corners of the thousand-faced assassin's lips curved up. He suddenly said, "Your Highness, Crown Prince, you had best not act rashly." Sua's complexion darkened. He didn't need to be reminded. In this situation, how could he dare to act? These people of the Peach Garden were truly sinister and sinister. In particular, Gao Zhuangzhuang. Before, he always thought he was a slightly pedantic and modest gentleman. But after seeing him today, he wished that he could dig his eyes out and crush them. There was nothing wrong with hiding their strength. This was what everyone did. Unless it was a critical moment, no one would easily reveal their cards. But hiding one's strength wasn't the same as transforming into a living person. The head disciple of the Peach Garden, Gao Zhuangzhuang, was actually a peerless sword cultivator. This was far too terrifying. If he didn't see it with his own eyes, who would dare to tell Sua that the head disciple of the Peach Garden was a sword cultivator? Sua would have punched them in the face for speaking such nonsense. In the entire Peach Garden, including the Peach Garden Master, there wasn't a single person who used a sword. And more importantly, ever since the Peach Garden's head disciple became famous, there had never been a single record of him drawing a sword. But without a doubt, this was the truth. Because at this time, Gao Zhuangzhuang was circling around Qinyu, the sword in his hand as fast as lightning. Wherever he went, space cracks would be cut apart. This was called sword intent rampaging. Moreover, what was most terrifying was that Sua discovered that he wasn't a match for the swordsman Gao Zhuangzhuang at all. As he sensed the space cracks from afar, his scalp tingled. But now he had been casually and cleanly chopped up like he was chopping melons and vegetables. These people of the Peach Garden were far too sinister, and their methods were far too sharp. If the thousand-faced assassin suddenly said this, could it be that he wanted to lure him into attacking? After all, on the surface, this was indeed the best time. He couldn't be fooled. He absolutely couldn't be fooled. But even if he didn't, would the Peach Garden let him go after knowing so many things today? He was the dignified, heavenly palace crown prince. At this moment, he felt that his future was pitch black. He was shaken by the sharp sword intent of his eldest senior apprentice brother. This was the thought that appeared in the heart of the seventh senior sister, the thousand-faced assassin, when she saw the heavenly palace crown prince's reaction. This was also true. After all, even for her, this was the first time she had seen her eldest senior apprentice brother use a sword. Before, she always felt that the outwardly gentle eldest senior apprentice brother had a dangerous spirit hidden in his bones. She never expected him to be a sword cultivator. But why had eldest senior brother deliberately concealed his identity as a sword cultivator all this while? There must be some other reason behind this. The seventh senior's sister touched her face. Her fingers suddenly paused, thinking that it couldn't be such a coincidence, right? I hid in the Peach Garden to avoid disaster and didn't dare to show my true body to others. Could it be the same for you? Her eyes fell on her eldest senior apprentice brother, and she frowned. Suddenly, she wasn't in the mood to think about these things, because her eldest senior apprentice brother's condition seemed to be worse than she thought. Chila, the eldest senior apprentice brother, drew back. He looked down at his arm. His robe was neatly cut, and after a flash of bloodlight, it disappeared. Chapter 1295. He couldn't wait any longer. Seventh senior apprentice, sister stepped forward and landed beside the eldest senior apprentice brother. Without waiting for him to speak, she said, "I know my own limits and won't take any risks. I'll hide behind you and help you a little." The eldest senior apprentice brother revealed a helpless expression. With his understanding of the thousand-faced person, since she had come here, she wouldn't be persuaded away with just a few words. But now he didn't have much time to speak. He could only quickly warn her, "Remember what you said." He reached out and grabbed hold of the thousand-faced person. The eldest senior apprentice, brother, couldn't feel at ease leaving her alone. The power of the spatial cracks created by the giant's control was truly terrifying. Peach Garden Walker had 7,000 faces and was regarded by the garden master as a member of the squad of 4.5 people. Of course, she didn't rely on her ability to change her face every day. She was strong, otherwise it would have been impossible for her sneak attack to tear open Nightwalker's chest, dig out his beating heart, and force him into a dead end. After she joined the team, the pressure on the eldest senior apprentice brother eased a little, but the spatial cracks were endless. They didn't decrease because the two of them cut through them. Instead, as time passed, they became more and more numerous. If they wanted to protect Chinyu, they would have to face more slashes. They would have to attack faster and more fiercely. In the end, 7th senior apprentice sister's strength was inferior to the eldest senior apprentice brother's. Moreover, she had also been injured by Nightwalker's hateful punch. With a soft PU sound, her face was immediately cut open. Blood gushed out and dripped down her cheek. The eldest senior apprentice brother grabbed her hand and pulled her behind him. 7th senior apprentice sister touched her cheek and smiled. "It's nothing. It's just a bag of skin. I'll be fine tomorrow." The eldest senior apprentice brother shook his head. This was because he knew that although this spatial crack seemed to have only injured her flesh, if the thousand-faced person's reaction had been any slower, her entire head would have been instantly split open. In truth, risking one's life was divided into different levels. He originally thought that he could do anything he wanted, but it was clear that his youngest junior apprentice brother needed more time. He couldn't allow his junior apprentice sister to take any more risks. And to tell the truth, if he persisted any longer, there was a chance that something would go wrong. "Junior apprentice sister, I'll have to trouble you later." Eldest senior brother raised his head and looked at the giant who controlled the spatial crack. His eyes suddenly burst with light, and in the next moment a monstrous sword chime sounded, as if a sword that had been sealed for countless years was once again unsheathed and descended into the world. The crown prince of the heavenly palace was already numb. Seeing this, his heart only twitched a few times, and then immediately calmed down. Sure enough, these people in the peach garden were all extremely sinister. Who knew what kind of tricks they would play in the next moment? The fact that Gao Zhuang was a terrifying sword cultivator was already shocking enough, but the scene before them showed that he could become even more terrifying. If he really had some thoughts that he shouldn't have, then he would have been chopped into two by this sword, right? If the eldest senior brother's sword principal aura was said to be invincible and unstoppable before, then the sword that he slashed out at this moment was truly destructive, cutting everything in its path. The perfectly straight, black crack pierced through the space between him and the giant. It didn't stop as it entered the giant's body and came out from the other side. Then it continued forward until it reached the end of his line of sight. It even gave off an illusion that after the eldest senior brother's sword slashed out, the entire Lost Garden would be cut in half. The endless spatial cracks suddenly froze in place. The closest one was only several inches away from Chinyu's forehead. Then it quietly shattered. Kacha! A blood-red crack appeared between the giant's eyebrows. It continued to spread downwards until it finally pierced through its entire body. The silver roots within had completely darkened, as if their life force had been severed by this sword. The giant's body fell to the ground. But before it could touch the ground, it was twisted into countless pieces by the horrifying sword intent. Immediately, the smell of blood filled the air. The eldest senior brother's complexion was pale. He turned his head and smiled at 7th senior apprentice, sister, before falling into her arms. "Don't smile and don't speak. Hurry and close your eyes to restore your mind." The thousand-faced assassin's complexion wasn't good. He looked up at Chinyu and couldn't help but grit his teeth. This little bastard, Don't think that you can rely on your sweet mouth to get away with this. After taking 2 deep breaths, the eldest senior brother said, I'm fine. I just need to rest for a period of time. But before he finished speaking, he was interrupted. The 1,000-faced assassin sneered, At this time, you still have the mood to care about others. It seems you really aren't afraid of death. The eldest senior brother decisively shut up. Although Qin Yu hadn't woken up yet, it wasn't difficult for him to hear the conversation between the eldest senior brother and 7th senior apprentice sister. He was moved and grateful, but he couldn't help but bitterly smile. It seemed that this time he had really tricked the eldest senior brother. In his current state, it wasn't something that could be restored just by resting. The favor he owed was too great. After today, he would have to take the initiative to propose compensation. Otherwise, while the eldest senior brother wouldn't have any problems, 7th senior apprentice sister would definitely explode. These two, he had never heard of them before. Moreover, could the eldest senior brother accept senior apprentice sister's current state? Or was it because of this that the eldest senior brother's heart was moved? Cough, cough. After all, he was still a man. That little bit of darkness in his heart wasn't any different. Once he was together with 7th senior apprentice sister. That was simply a paradise he yearned for even in his dreams. After all, the most famous aspect of 7th senior apprentice sister was that she had different faces every day, and every one of them was extremely beautiful. Stop, hurry up and stop. This was too much. Qin Yu, the eldest senior brother, had just risked his life just now to buy you such a crucial period of time. If you turn around and think like this, then you are too ungrateful. That's right, the moment the eldest senior brother slashed out with his sword and killed the giant, the transformation within Qin Yu's body had already ended. Now, all he needed to do was extract the last bit of strength from the spirit snake's body, and he would have completed his mission. The journey to the Lost Garden was full of twists and turns. He had faced death several times and suffered many hardships. But in the end, his harvests were enough to offset all of this. Before, when he comprehended light and darkness as one and also had the support of the power of space and time, Qin Yu barely had the strength to protect himself. But from today onwards, no one could casually kill him. Or, to put it more bluntly, Qin Yu now had the ability to bully others. It was just that he didn't have a reference right now, so it was hard to say what level he could bully others to. But a saint who was struggling in the sea of bitterness like a half-saint shouldn't have any problems, right? Thinking of this, even with Qin Yu's firm will, he couldn't help but feel his heart surge with excitement. When he was in the endless sea, he had barged into it in order to make a name for himself. He had trembled in front of a saint who could easily kill a slightly stronger ant like him with a single finger. He was saved by Peach Girl, and the yard master had helped to protect him. Then he was able to enter the peach garden to cultivate. Thinking about it carefully, it hadn't been long since he had gained the confidence to crush a half-saint. This speed of improvement couldn't be said to be unprecedented, but at least in the endless vast young world, it was enough to shock the world. Moreover, this was done by Qin Yu himself. It was a relatively conservative expectation. His true strength still needed to be tested. After all, whether it was the body of rules or the true god Tao that had stepped into the level of the galaxy divine seal, he couldn't accurately compare the power they possessed because there had never been such a precedent before. In the past, when the yard master mentioned that in order to save Peach Girl, he had to become a ruler. Although Qin Yu forced himself to remain calm, his heart was filled with despair and helplessness. He couldn't imagine what he relied on to obtain the vacant position of a ruler that surpassed the true saint of the other shore. But today, although he still wasn't completely sure about the future, he was no longer lost. So what if he was a ruler? As long as he moved forward step by step, there would come a day when he would reach it. This was the confidence that Qin Yu felt after his strength had soared. After experiencing the tribulation of tempering the heart and living for 100 years as a mortal, Qin Yu's faith in cultivation had been strengthened. Compared to increasing his cultivation, Tempering the heart didn't seem as important. But when Qin Yu truly had the qualifications to attack the vacant position of a ruler, he would know just how important a firm and unwavering heart was. Qin Yu's heart stirred and a sneer appeared on his lips. He never thought that there would still be people hiding in the dark, trying to fish for benefits. It was someone he knew. He could use them to test his current strength. "Master, please wait." It was the old turtle. "I think I might have found a suitable body for myself." The stone tower said, "Master, the shadow of the abyss has injured your source. If you have a mortal body to nourish you, you might be able to recover faster." Qin Yu arched an eyebrow. "Which one?" "The one with the extra head." Bang! A powerful aura suddenly erupted. A massive shadow fell down, and the figure of a terrifying beast appeared. It was shaped like a large snake, but it had 9 fierce heads. Right now, its 18 cold and gloomy eyes were locked onto Qin Yu. Without hesitation, the 9 heads opened their mouths and ruthlessly swallowed him. 9 heads! The elder senior apprentice, brother's eyes flashed open. 7th senior apprentice, sister held him down. "Don't move. Leave this to me." Qin Yu! Qin Yu! You bastard! You owe me a great favor this time. You better be able to repay me for my harvest. Otherwise this old lady will never forgive you. She took a deep breath, and her chest puffed out at an astonishing angle. Just as she was about to attack, her body suddenly froze. She opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. She grabbed onto the elder senior apprentice brother and rapidly drew back. "Qin Yu, elder senior apprentice brother, and I are powerless to do anything else. You can only rely on yourself." The elder senior apprentice brother wanted to say something, but he immediately shut his mouth after she glared at him. He let out a long breath of relief. It seemed that his junior apprentice brother had woken up. What did he want to do? The Heavenly Palace Crown Prince's complexion changed. Qin Yu? Peach Garden's Miss 9? Was he going to obtain the approval of the Garden Master and become Taoist companions with Peach Blossom? Sure enough, my guess was right. Everything that happened today was part of the Peach Blossom Garden's plan. As for this moment, 1,000 faces suddenly spat out blood and retreated while holding on to the elder senior apprentice brother. Forget it. He could deceive others, but he absolutely wouldn't believe it. There must be a conspiracy. There must be a conspiracy. It was just that he didn't know whether he was going to bury the West Mountain 9 heads or the strange cultivator in front of him. Seeing the crown prince of the Heavenly Palace look at him, Longfeng smiled and cupped his hands. "As long as your highness remains quiet, you and I will be safe." His smile was calm and indifferent, but the aura he released was extremely violent. It seemed that he could transform into a terrifying giant beast that could destroy everything at any time. Su Teng decisively took a step back. He thought, "Even if you force me to attack, I won't move at all. It's fine if you want to die, but don't try to drag me down with you." But what should I do to avoid being killed by the Peach Blossom Garden and survive today? Just thinking about it gave him a headache. Longfeng was slightly surprised. He didn't think that the dignified crown prince of the Heavenly Palace would be so timid. Before he spoke, he was already prepared to fight with him. After all, the Peach Blossom Garden had been eliminated. The only ones who were qualified to compete were him, 9 heads, and the crown prince of the Heavenly Palace. He couldn't figure it out, and the crown prince of the Heavenly Palace had a strange look in his eyes. But now that things had come to this point, it was impossible to retreat any further. There was no need to think about it any further. If he could obtain the corpse of this spirit snake and kill everyone here, then the forbearance he endured for the first half of his life would be worth it. Qin Yu? It was actually him. 9 had suddenly realized that perhaps the accident that happened to his master and the destruction of his divine sense was because of this person. As soon as he thought of this, a cold light erupted from the eyes of the 9 heads. The power of swallowing suddenly became stronger. Even if it wasn't for his master, Swallowing this person, refining him, and seizing all of his good fortune was Nine Heads' current goal. That Longfeng fellow was indeed strong, and his methods were strange and fierce. But did he want to use a contract to restrain him? It was simply ridiculous. He wouldn't spit out what he swallowed. As an ancient creature variant, the nine-headed evil beast could be considered a close relative of the Taotai. Its body could smelt all things and seize all power. Therefore, as long as he swallowed Qinyu into his belly, everything would be decided. Everything went smoothly. It went so smoothly that the Nine Heads' vigilance fell through. Whoosh! With the sound of breaking through the air, Qinyu whistled over. Then, in the next moment, he directly submerged into the open mouth of the middle head. Success! Nine Heads' 18 eyes revealed ecstasy at the same time. Without the slightest hesitation, he directly stimulated the power of smelting in his body. Soon, in just a dozen or so breaths of time, Qinyu would turn into a puddle of flesh and blood, completely absorbed and plundered by him. Chapter 1296. But at this moment, the nine-headed evil beast's eyes that were filled with ecstasy suddenly froze and then turned into endless fear. Its 9 heads opened their mouths at the same time, but not a single sound came out. Then, a bit of darkness emerged from the depths of its 18 eyes at the same time and spread out like a tide. It was as if an eternal night had descended, causing all of its eyes to turn pitch black. This scene only lasted for a moment. The nine-headed beast's eyes returned to normal, and its aura was the same as before. Who would have thought that the consciousness controlling this body had been replaced by someone who was extremely afraid of death? As a shadow of the abyss, the possibility of the old turtle seizing a body wasn't high. Its mortal body had to meet many harsh requirements, but things were so coincidental. The nine-headed evil beast wanted to swallow Qinyu, but all of the conditions were met. As for the dignified West Mountain disciple, in the blink of an eye his consciousness was annihilated. This was normal. Qinyu imprisoned his soul and allowed the old turtle to smoothly invade it. When the darkness spread, everything was doomed. In front of the heavenly palace crown prince, Long Feng's complexion changed. Without hesitation he turned and fled. The nine-headed evil beast laughed at him for not being smart enough. But it didn't know that if Long Feng could endure until today, how could he be easy to deal with? The nine-headed evil beast thought that he had only signed a contract, but it didn't know that when this contract was completed, it was already under someone else's control. Because of this, the moment the nine-headed soul was swallowed, Long Feng sensed something. He didn't know what happened, but he could clearly feel the fear and despair that the nine-headed soul sent out before it was swallowed. Bang! With a loud explosion, the fleeing Long Feng seemed to bump into an invisible iron plate. With a stuffy cough, he came to a sudden stop. The nine-headed evil beast opened its mouth, and Qinyu stepped out. Fellow Taoist Long Feng, since you've come, why are you in such a hurry to leave? Shwa! Light flashed, and the giant nine-headed evil beast disappeared from sight. The nine-headed evil beast lowered its head and respectfully stood behind Qinyu. The heavenly palace crown prince's lips twitched. He shouted inwardly that he knew it would be like this. If someone wanted to scheme against the peach garden, they probably didn't know how to write the word death. Su Ting shuddered at the thought of how everything had been within his calculations from the moment he entered the peach garden. The calm look on the yard owner's face suddenly emerged in his mind. This was probably what people meant by the saying that she was unfathomable, that she was experienced and astute, and that she had taken every possible possibility into account. That's right, of course. From Su Ting's point of view, all of this was the doing of a true divine. Only such a powerful person would dare to do such a thing. He did not hesitate to sacrifice the lives of nearly all the peak cultivators in the Lost Garden in order to accomplish his goal. The dignified crown prince of the heavenly palace was in awe and fear, but at the same time he couldn't suppress his jealousy. He couldn't figure out why Qinyu was able to receive the wholehearted support of the yard mistress. It was obvious that whether it was the Peach Blossom Garden's first disciple or the 7,000 Faces Walker, they were both working tirelessly to ensure Qin Yu's safety at the critical moment. And all of the benefits, at least for now, were all obtained by Qin Yu alone. Of course, jealousy was just jealousy. Su Teng had no intention of doing anything because he had seen Nine Heads' fate with his own eyes. That was the West Mountain Nine Heads. Whether it was strength, status, or reputation, he was a powerhouse of the younger generation that could compare with him. But what was the result? He didn't even see what Qin Yu had done before Nine Heads fell into his trap. If Nine Heads had been killed like Night Walker, then the Heavenly Palace Crown Prince would feel some dread. But Nine Heads was alive and well, without the slightest sign of injury. Instead, he stood respectfully behind Qin Yu, like a puppet. This was far too frightening. The people of the Peach Blossom Garden were truly more evil than the last, more ruthless than the last. Long Feng's thoughts raced. He expressionlessly said, "Mr. Ninth knows me?" Qin Yu nodded. "The reason I was able to enter the Lost Garden this time was because of the Dragon Mountain, Holy Lands. It's just that my appearance has changed a bit, so you don't recognize me?" Long Feng's complexion changed. "It's you." From this reaction, it seemed that this cultivator from the Dragon Mountain Holy Lands had sensed something from the very beginning. He was only pretending not to know in order to hide himself. Qin Yu said, "In the end, I still owe your Dragon Mountain Holy Lands a favor. Allowing you to leave is my greatest sincerity." "Hold on." Long Feng's tongue felt dry and his heart raced. "Mr. Ninth, I can convince my father to join the Peach Blossom Garden's camp," but halfway through his words he was interrupted. He looked down and saw a terrifying wound on his chest. Thick blood flowed out from his mouth and nose. The aura of life was flowing out of the wound, and the blood was flowing out quickly. He could feel his own weakness and a gradually growing chill. Long Feng's lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but he was interrupted by more blood gushing out. Why was this happening? He still had many things he wanted to say. Long Feng was confident that as long as Qin Yu heard everything, he wouldn't choose to kill him. After all, there wasn't any irreconcilable hatred between the two sides. But before he could even finish speaking, all of his life force had been severed. Why? Why was this happening? Long Feng had patiently endured the first half of his life in order to rise up and become known to the world. But before he had done anything, he was about to die. Long Feng wasn't willing. He couldn't accept this. But this couldn't stop his life force from rapidly fading away. His field of vision began to darken. Long Feng was well aware of his current condition. He could close his eyes at any moment and never open them again. But he still didn't fall down. He stubbornly stared at Qin Yu, blood gushing out from his mouth. Qin Yu drew back his hand. He thought for a moment and slowly said, "You are too smart. To be able to hide for so many years, your thoughts are far too heavy. Since such a person has already become an opponent, killing him is the best choice. So I didn't listen to what you had to say because once I did, I feared I would really be moved by your words." So that's how it was. "Qin Yu, you really are a smart bastard. If I could survive today, but what a pity I won't have that day." Bang! Long Feng's corpse fell to the ground. Qin Yu didn't look at him again. He turned and stepped forwards, bowing. "Greetings, elder senior apprentice brother, 7th senior apprentice sister. I thank senior apprentice brother and senior apprentice sister for helping me stall for time." The elder senior apprentice brother's face was pale and weak. He smiled. "You and I are both disciples of Peach Blossom Garden. As the elder senior apprentice brother, it is only right that I cough." 7th senior apprentice sister lightly coughed. The elder senior apprentice brother shut up. As Qin Yu saw this, although he felt uneasy, he still thought it was quite funny. 7th senior apprentice sister, please speak." The thousand-faced disciple's complexion relaxed a little. This little bastard Qin Yu, his thoughts were quite clear and his attitude was quite good. But his face remained cold. In order to help you, do you know what price elder senior apprentice brother paid? Qin Yu honestly said, I do. You know what to do. I know. The thousand-faced disciple's cold expression melted like snow beneath the blazing sun. He smiled and said, I know that our little junior apprentice brother is someone who knows how to repay kindness and has a good conscience. Qin Yu's lips twitched. Senior apprentice sister, what were you hiding in your sleeves just now? If I didn't say that, I fear I would have been hit in the head. Cough. With a light cough, Qin Yu determined that although the elder senior apprentice brother was weak, there wouldn't be any problems for the time being. He turned and asked, Seventh senior apprentice sister, what should we do next? The heavenly palace crown prince's complexion paled. It was like a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. He felt his heart turn cold. Nine-Headed hadn't died, but Longfeng had died. Moreover, he had died right in front of him. And Qin Yu, who had killed him, had just casually pressed forward. He hadn't even been able to figure out what Qin Yu had done. But this wasn't important. What was important was that if Qin Yu wanted to kill him now, it wouldn't be difficult at all. The seventh senior apprentice, sister, clearly understood Qin Yu's meaning. She looked at him with a bit of appreciation, thinking that this little junior apprentice brother was quite bold. He even wanted to stay here with the heavenly palace crown prince. Oh, about this, just as she opened her mouth, she was interrupted by the elder senior apprentice brother. Thousand-faced disciple, don't scare Wojtek. The peach orchard and the heavenly palace have a good relationship, and Wojtek is my friend. Qin Yu fell silent. Not to mention the good relationship between the Holy Lands, he was just a friend. Was he going to let him go? The elder senior apprentice brother hesitated for a moment, a strange expression on his face. Does little junior apprentice brother want to silence me? Qin Yu coughed lightly. Although this was the case, there was no need to say it out loud. But since his intention had been exposed, there was no need to hide it. He nodded and pointed to the altar, which was now just an empty shell of the spirit snake's corpse. Elder senior apprentice brother, it's best not to let others know about this matter. The thousand faces laughed out loud. Little junior apprentice brother, sometimes people can't see through you. It's like you're deeply hidden, but sometimes you're so silly and cute. Do you really think that after you kill Su Shi, no one will know about this matter? She raised her hand and pointed up. The top of the mountain has been blown up. The movement was so big that it might have been seen by someone. Moreover, since Nine-Headed and Longfeng can hide in the dark, can you guarantee that no one is hiding now? They were just scared by you and didn't dare to take any risks. They just came out. Qin Yu's expression changed slightly. He really hadn't considered these things for a while. Now it seemed that there was no hope for him to hide himself. Although his strength had greatly increased, and he didn't need to fear anyone, if the news about the pre-celestial spirit was leaked out, Qin Yu would still be in trouble. After all, the power of a pre-celestial spirit was not something that the Yard Master, Sage Scholatry, and other top true saints would miss. It was even possible that a ruler would take action. What a headache! But these things obviously couldn't be solved just by thinking about it. If there really was a problem, he could only deal with it as it came. He would deal with it as it came. Thinking of this, Qin Yu smiled and cupped his hands together. Your Highness Crown Prince, what happened before was just a joke. Please don't take it to heart. Su Shi's lips twitched. Did you even believe what you said? When Qin Yu looked at him just now, the cold feeling that seeped into his heart was still fresh in his memory. Now, seeing that killing him to silence him didn't work, he turned around and changed his attitude. These people from the Peach Blossom Garden were not only sinister and sharp, but also shameless. But in the current situation, he didn't dare to show it. Sushi squeezed out a smile. Of course, it was a joke. It was just a joke, the eldest senior brother suddenly said. Since it was a joke, let's forget about today's matter. Don't mention it again in the future. There were two meanings to these words. The first was that Qin Yu's performance just now had caused Shi to guarantee that he wouldn't retaliate. The second was that he wanted to forget today's matter. After leaving the Lost Garden, he wouldn't say anything he shouldn't say. Shi nodded. Of course. As he spoke, he finally relaxed. It seemed that the people from the Peach Blossom Garden weren't planning on staying behind with him today. Of course, although he relaxed, he didn't reduce his vigilance in the slightest. There were far too many things that happened when one lost their life due to carelessness. Moreover, the ones he was facing now were the disciples of the Peach Blossom Garden. Qin Yu bowed. Thank you, eldest senior brother. The seventh senior sister said, It's best if you don't just talk big. Qin Yu bitterly smiled. Senior apprentice sister, don't worry. All right. The eldest senior brother looked at the spirit snake's corpse, his voice pausing for a moment. Qin Yu said, Eldest senior brother, this snake corpse isn't safe to hide. In order to avoid any accidents, we should hurry and leave. The eldest senior brother nodded. All right. Qin Yu gestured with a hand. Your Highness Crown Prince, please. She bitterly smiled. He naturally didn't dare to refuse. He couldn't help but sweep his eyes over the spirit snake's corpse, surprise in his eyes. What was going on? After killing everyone, he actually abandoned the spoils of war. Or did he take what he wanted? Whoosh, whoosh. With the sound of breaking air, the heavenly palace crown prince flew up with the 3 people from the Peach Blossom Garden following behind. After the 4 people left, there were faint roars of joy from deep within the mountain. The seal reactivated once more, sealing away the mountain peak. The 7th senior sister turned and looked at the mountain peak covered in fog. Her eyes flashed. Junior apprentice brother, aren't you going to explain? Qin Yu coughed. Before he could speak, he was interrupted by her. Forget it. I don't want to hear lies, and I doubt you will tell me the truth. If you say everything, then I can only blink my eyes and smile in silence. The eldest senior brother opened his eyes. 7th junior apprentice sister, don't tease us anymore. But too many people have died in the Lost Garden. I fear there will be more twists and turns before we leave. For this, we should make some preparations ahead of time. Qin Yu nodded. Thank you for the reminder, eldest senior brother. The Lost Garden opened. Within the entire St. Dao circle, as long as they had the qualifications to stuff people in, they would throw a few people in. After a series of twists and turns, although there were many that survived, the elites amongst them, besides a few that weren't able to enter the mountain, had all perished. With such serious consequences, even if the saints were high and lofty, they would still be enraged and an investigation would be inevitable. In addition, Qin Yu also had some worries in his heart. For instance, the true saint whose puppet body had been tricked and killed by him, and the netherworld saint who had been kidnapped by his own son Yixing and had his great Dao foundation blown up. With the status of a true saint, would he tolerate his puppet body being destroyed by a mere junior? Moreover, the netherworld saint's projection had clearly seen the spirit snake's corpse. As for whether or not he had recognized the pre-celestial spirit, no one could guarantee that. The more he thought about it, the more troublesome it seemed. Chapter 1297. In order to avoid such a tricky situation, Qin Yu decided to slip away first. He did not want to go with eldest senior brother and 7th senior sister. Instead, he changed his appearance and left the Lost Garden alone. For Qin Yu, who had a body of rules, this was a very simple matter. As long as he was careful, he should not be discovered. Before leaving, Thousand-Faced had asked him where he was going. Was there only one exit to the Lost Garden? That faint smile in her eyes almost made Qin Yu believe that she had already seen through something. Unable to answer, he could only laugh dryly, turn around, and flee. In fact, 7th senior sister was right. There was indeed only one exit to the Lost Garden, but this was for someone else. The Lost Garden existed because of the corpse of the pre-celestial spirit, and now almost all of its power was in Qin Yu's body. Therefore, whenever Qin Yu wanted to leave, he could leave. Wherever he wanted to open a door, he could open a door. He had thought of bringing eldest senior brother and seventh senior sister with him. But it would be difficult to explain many things, such as the pre-celestial spirit or the power he possessed now. Qin Yu felt that the more people knew about the existence of the pre-celestial spirit, the better, as long as he did not admit it and did not personally experience it. Even if someone suspected him later, they would not be able to obtain any concrete evidence. Of course, the most important point in making this decision was that with such a big commotion, the yard master would definitely come. Since the yard master was here, the safety of eldest senior brother and seventh senior sister would not be a problem. There was not much time left, so he might as well stay here. Shua, stopping! Qin Yu raised his hand and drew a line in front of him. The space quietly tore open, revealing a black crack. Without hesitation, he stepped into it. Nine-Headed obediently followed behind him. Half-Sage Dragon Mountain's face was livid, his eyes faintly turning red. His body trembled, and blue veins popped up on the back of his hands. Long Feng, his son, the son he had high hopes for, had died just like that. Countless years of patient cultivation and painstaking effort had come to naught. If not for the fact that the mind of a saint was strong enough, he would have already gone crazy. What had happened in the Lost Garden? With Long Feng's strength and cautiousness, he had actually died there. He had to find the answer. Taking a deep breath, Half-Sage Dragon Mountain's eyes slowly swept around. He could feel the oppressive atmosphere. At this moment, there were many saints gathered at the entrance of the Lost Garden, and most of them exuded an ice-cold aura that warned others not to enter. This indirectly verified the guess in Dragon Mountain's heart that a great change must have occurred in the Lost Garden. Was it the work of an ancient creature, or... Half-Sage Dragon Mountain took a deep breath, a cold glint surging in his eyes. The former was fine, but if it was the latter, no matter who it was to die with his son. Qin Yu quietly left the Lost Yu. The whole process went smoothly without any danger. The best choice at the moment was, of course, to leave quickly and go as far away as possible, lest he got caught in the next storm. However, eldest senior brother and seventh senior sister were still here. Although, logically speaking, as long as the yard master was here, absolutely no one would dare to lay a finger on them. However, he still felt a little uneasy about not being able to see them leave safely with his own eyes. Master, master, Nine to you to say. Master to master, you said. To go. Dragon, master to said. To master. Qin Yu nodded. That makes sense. He took a step forward, and the space around him fluctuated. His figure rapidly faded away within these fluctuations. Master, wait for me. After several breaths of time, Qin Yu and 9 to 9 walked out from the spatial fluctuations. Qin Yu looked into the distance, and his complexion changed. His eldest senior brother and seventh sister were right. Too many people had died in the Lost Garden, and they were all elite cultivators of the Saint Tao Circle. Now, Qin Yu could sense that there were at least 20 saints hiding in this expanse of the heavens and the earth. It was clear that they were waiting for the Lost Garden to open and see what had happened. He would stay here. Once he saw his eldest senior brother and seventh sister retreat safely, he would immediately leave. And perhaps he could try to find the hidden pearl if she was still here. Many cultivators had gathered at the entrance of the Lost Garden. Their faces were pale and their eyes were filled with shock. They kept glancing at a certain corner. The Peach Garden's head disciple and 7,000 faces were also here. Their expressions were extremely calm, and it was impossible to see their emotions from the surface. The Heavenly Palace's crown prince sat not too far away. Feeling the many eyes on him, he felt extremely unhappy and wanted to shout out loud, "What are you all looking at? This matter has nothing to do with me. If you want to find someone, go find the Peach Garden." Of course, this was just venting in his heart. He didn't dare to say it out loud, at least not now. He hadn't even left the lost garden. Who knew if these people from the peach garden had any other methods? Void subjugation hadn't forgotten that a fierce woman had carried Chinyu to the altar. She still hadn't shown herself. Thinking of this, the Heavenly Palace's crown prince felt a chill run down his spine. He hurriedly lowered his head. No, he should just close his eyes. You can look however you want. It has nothing to do with me. Don't think that I can give you any hints. Along with void subjugation, the Peach Garden's two disciples were constantly being watched. Although they appeared calm on the surface, they were secretly communicating through the Peach Garden's disciple Mark. The elder senior apprentice brother's expression was calm. Seventh junior apprentice sister, why must you call out our junior apprentice brother's identity? We can just find a reason to evade it. The thousand-faced elder senior apprentice brother said, Does elder senior apprentice brother really think that this matter can be easily evaded? The elder senior apprentice brother fell silent. Look, elder senior apprentice brother, you clearly know that the great snake's corpse isn't ordinary. Moreover, so many people died, including the West Mountain Nine Heads and Netherworld Nightcrawler. We must give everyone an explanation. The elder senior apprentice brother sighed. Our junior apprentice brother is incomparably smart. So how could he not know what you are thinking? I am only worried that he was interrupted by the thousand-faced elder senior apprentice brother. It is precisely because our junior apprentice brother is smart that we don't need to worry. You and I both saw the methods Chinyu used to kill Longfeng with our own eyes, so there must have been some amazing harvests. As the one who benefited from the Lost Garden, what's wrong with taking the blame? He paused for a moment and continued to say, At worst, when he compensates us, I'll open my mouth a little so he doesn't bleed too much. The elder senior apprentice brother fell silent. The thousand-faced elder senior apprentice brother said, Fine, I know you feel embarrassed. I'll take the initiative to apologize to our junior apprentice brother, okay? I'll be the evil one, and you'll still be the righteous elder senior apprentice brother. The elder senior apprentice brother forced a smile. You know, that's not what I meant. Halfway through his words, he let out a deep breath. Forget it. Saying these things now is useless. I can only hope that this storm will pass as soon as possible and not cause too much trouble. Kacha! Light cracking sounds spread into everyone's ears. Everyone outside the entrance looked up. In the skies above, a black hole slowly appeared in the shattered space. The exit opened. Go. Leave here. Go back. Whoosh, whoosh. Everyone impatiently shot into the skies, submerging into the black hole and vanishing. Space twisted and a figure appeared. The powerful aura of a saint swept through the entire area. Honorable Master, the two cultivators that rushed out of the Lost Garden immediately revealed looks of ecstasy. Humph, tell me just what happened here. Why did your senior apprentice brother die here? The two people subconsciously turned their heads and looked behind them. The saint sneered. What are you hesitating for? If you know something, then just say it. I will make the decision for you. Reporting to Honorable Master. One day after we entered the Lost Garden, we suddenly received a powerful divine sense message stating that there was a great mountain in the Lost Garden that supported the heavens. Our cultivations weren't high enough, and we encountered dangers halfway there. We had no choice but to give up and retreat. Senior apprentice brother continued forwards. We must have entered that mountain, but we don't know what happened afterwards. A terrifying aura erupted from that mountain, and the summit exploded. A terrifying eye appeared in the skies, looking down at the world. We don't know what exactly happened, but almost all the cultivators that entered that mountain died. Only the two Peach Blossom Garden disciples and the Heavenly Palace crown prince managed to escape unscathed. As they asked and answered, they roughly explained what had happened. The saint's complexion changed. The Peach Blossom Garden and the Heavenly Palace were both peak holy lands. They weren't existences that a mere half-saint like him could provoke. But soon he caught onto the crux of the two disciples' words. Are you saying that only the Peach Blossom Garden disciples and the Heavenly Palace Crown Prince managed to escape unscathed? The two cultivators hurriedly said, That's right. The saint flicked his sleeves. An invisible strength gushed out and pulled the two disciples behind him. A cold chill tumbled in the depths of his eyes. This matter wouldn't be easily forgotten. He just needed to calmly wait. The Peach Blossom Garden and the Heavenly Palace. Humph, humph, so what if they were strong? As far as he knew, nearly half of the elite junior cultivators of the St. Dao Circle had perished after this incident. There had to be an explanation for such a serious matter, and at the same time, similar inquiries were being carried out in many places. All the saints that knew what had happened had an intuition. There was bound to be a problem today. As the eldest senior brother and seventh senior sister walked out of the black hole, they instantly sensed a formidable pressure fall upon them. A saint. As expected, trouble was coming. The eldest senior brother stepped forwards and cupped his hands together. The disciples of the Peach Blossom Garden greet the saints. After several breaths of silence, a cold voice sounded out. I wouldn't dare to greet you. I just want to know what happened on that mountain that nearly all of our cultivators were annihilated. That's right. Since the Peach Blossom Garden disciples managed to escape unscathed, they should be able to help us resolve this doubt. Speak. The air suddenly froze. A terrifying pressure gathered, as if the void would freeze and turn into an invisible prison. The eldest senior brother was already severely injured to begin with. Now that he was suppressed, he stuffily coughed and blood flowed out from the corners of his lips. He reached out and grabbed hold of the thousand-faced assassin. He shook his head at her and said, I can understand the feelings of the saints, but when cultivators go adventuring, their life and death is up to the heavens. I can guarantee that all those who died have nothing to do with the Peach Blossom Garden. You are lying. An angry roar sounded out. A cultivator walked out of the lost garden, his face twisted with resentment. I am a disciple of the Western Mountains. Before senior apprentice, brother, Nine-Headed entered that mountain, he had us hide outside the mountain in order to prevent any accidents. Although we didn't see what happened in the middle after the mountain peak exploded, we saw with our own eyes that the Peach Blossom Garden disciple Chinyu used some strange method to control senior apprentice, brother Nine-Headed, and then killed the cultivator who traveled with him. A cultivator called Dragon Peak. The crowd stirred. Chapter 1298. The name Chinyu had been very famous in the Sage Dao circle recently. Almost everyone knew him. Everyone was shocked when they heard that this matter was related to him. But soon, bewilderment appeared in their eyes. This was because, from start to finish, no one seemed to have seen Chinyu fight. The West Mountain cultivator sensed these surprised and doubtful eyes. He gritted his teeth and said, I swear that person is Chinyu. He stared at the eldest senior brother and the thousand faces. The man in a blood-red robe in front of the altar is Chinyu. Do you dare to admit it? The description of a blood-red robe stimulated the two people present. One of them, Su Shi, who was sobbing in front of the Su family semi-sage, was stunned. Tears welled up in his eyes. It was funny and strange. He thought of the purple-quality source of life that was so close to him. He could have reached out and touched it, but it was snatched away by someone. He swore that he would never forget that scene. And that person was also wearing a blood-red robe. Chinyu, he was Chinyu. Su Shi's eyes suddenly turned red. He gritted his teeth and roared, Chinyu? I, Su Shi, swear to kill you. Opposite him, the Su family's semi-sage's face turned green. He thought, You little bastard, why are you so crazy? Chinyu was now the son-in-law of the peach garden. Thinking of the yard master's face, he felt his whole body stiffen. Saint was a general term, and there were also levels within it. The most basic level was the bitter sea semi-sage and the nirvana, true saint. Although they were both saints, One was still struggling to resist the attack of the bitter sea, and his great Tao had not been completely condensed, while the other had reached the nirvana true Tao. Was there a need to mention the gap between them? Moreover, the yard master had been recognized by the world as one of the top true saints since many years ago. Although it was not that easy to kill one another in the divine path, if she were to be remembered, it would definitely be a bitter taste when the day of reckoning came. In short, the peach garden could not be provoked. But now, under the watchful eyes of the public, the saints still wanted to save face. The Su family semi-sage said, "Su, sure, you are too tired. Take a rest." "Father, just now I said that the one who stole my purple life source in the Lost Garden was a blood-robed cultivator. Now that I think about it, it must be Chin." Before he could finish his last word, the half-step saint of the Su family raised his hand and slapped him. With a paw sound, Su Shi's forehead turned red, and he fell to the ground with his eyes closed. The half-step saint's expression didn't change. He said indifferently, "Su Shi is tired and unconscious. Take him to rest." The cultivators of the Su family behind him came forward and hurriedly picked up the person and left. Looking at the familiarity of their movements, they seemed to be quite experienced. A female cultivator exclaimed, "Fellow Taoist Su Wei, you mentioned before that you were also tricked by a crimson-robed man in the Lost Garden." Her voice wasn't too loud, but it still attracted countless gazes. Su Wei's face turned green. This woman was the latest woman he had hooked up with in the Lost Garden. After all, as long as one's skills were good, there would always be spring. Regarding this matter, after a spar, he had said it in an indifferent tone. His purpose was nothing more than to set himself off, so the content of the story had been changed a little. In summary, he had been schemed against and had no choice but to suffer a small loss. It wasn't much to brag in bed with a woman, but for this bragging to be brought up again in today's setting was far too terrifying. In particular, as he felt the eyes of all those gathered on him, Su Wei wished he could strangle the woman in front of him with one hand and strangle himself with the other. "You bastard, why did you have to brag for no reason? Even if you wanted to brag, you wouldn't have chosen a better story. You were playing with me to death. No, I can't accept my fate. Didn't you see how that half-step saint of the Su family didn't even care about face and slapped his own son? Even a half-step saint couldn't provoke the peach blossom garden. So for a mere little cultivator of the plucking style to dare speak up was simply seeking death." "You heard wrong. I was talking about a green-robed man." Su Wei lightly coughed. He resisted the trembling of his hands and pulled her into his arms. "If you're sick, then rest well. Don't speak carelessly just because you have a fever." The woman in his arms also regained her composure. She closed her eyes and pretended to be dead. But of those present today, not to mention the various saints, there were no idiots either. How could they not see the depths of this? There really was a blood-robed man. This matched up with what the West Mountain cultivator had said. Could Chin, you really have entered the Lost Garden? As everyone thought of this, a thick feeling of conspiracy rose up in their hearts. Thinking about it, the Peach Blossom Garden had secretly sent disciples into the Lost Garden without anyone knowing. But what was the result? Almost all the cultivators that entered the mountain had died. And what was more important was that Chin Yu had disappeared. He hadn't come out with the crowd at all. No, there was still one person missing. The Peach Blossom Garden's 3 white phoenix. He had entered the Peach Blossom Garden with the head disciple and Lei Xiaoyu, but now he had also disappeared. Had he died in the Lost Garden? Originally, this was the most likely possibility, but after smelling the scent of a conspiracy, no one thought this was possible. No, that wasn't right. The one who had followed behind the Peach Blossom Garden's head disciple was Lei Xiaoyu, not this beautiful woman with long legs and fair skin. But if she was also a disciple of the Peach Blossom Garden, then besides Peach Maiden, there was only 1,000 faces. In other words, it was highly likely that Lei Xiaoyu was 1,000 faces in disguise. Everyone's eyes widened, their hearts shaking and their minds in chaos. They were nearly dazzled by the Peach Blossom Garden's messy operation. There was a problem. There was definitely a problem here. Chaos, utter chaos. Feeling everyone's eyes on him, the elder senior apprentice, brother, felt helpless, let alone others. Even he couldn't help but suspect whether or not his teacher had secretly made some arrangements. After all, the appearance of his junior apprentice brother and the final result all pointed towards the Peach Blossom Garden. Moreover, 7th junior apprentice sister's concealment, 3rd junior apprentice brother's disappearance, and there was also the junior apprentice brother. There was no way to clearly explain this. Thousand Faces took a step forward, her face tense and her voice cold. That's right, fellow Taoist of the West Mountains spoke of my Peach Blossom Garden's junior apprentice brother, but he didn't explain the reason. In this world, there has never been a reason that one cannot fight back, right? The 9 heads of the West Mountain are no different. They all brought about their own deaths. Could it be that the disciples of the Peach Blossom Garden should obediently stretch out their necks and wait to be slaughtered? If they die, it is because they are unlucky and their strength is inferior to others. That is all. My elder senior apprentice brother's injuries are serious and cannot be delayed any longer. He needs to return and receive treatment as soon as possible. If you saints wish to know the specifics, you can come to the Peach Blossom Garden to ask about it later. The air suddenly fell silent. The complexions of the many saints turned ugly. Although they did fear the Peach Blossom Garden, a mere junior dared to be so insolent? Wasn't that too bold? But today, the 2 from the Peach Blossom Garden wanted to leave. Who dared to stop them? The Peach Blossom Garden's head disciple was indeed in a terrible state. If something happened to him, even if he was fine, he could still be bitten. After all, that person from the Peach Blossom Garden had never been a person who was easy to deal with. It was fine if you didn't provoke him, but once you did, you wouldn't have a good time. The West Mountain cultivator roared in anger. Saints, the Peach Blossom Garden has schemed and killed countless elites of our fellow Taoists. Are we just going to let them leave like this? Where is the justice? The hearts of our fellow Taoists that died are cold. The 1,000-faced saint's lips curled up in a smile. She coldly looked at him. You can try to stop me. In the deathly silence, she supported the eldest senior apprentice brother. Senior apprentice brother, let's go. At this time, the complexions of the saints changed. They subconsciously drew back, their hearts shaking. Their first thought was to not be implicated and to quickly clear their names. Which fellow wasn't afraid of death? They actually dared to attack the disciples of the Peach Blossom Garden. Bang! With a loud explosion, the 1,000-faced saint lowered her arm and spat out a mouthful of blood. The edges of the wound on her snow-white face began to show signs of decay. As for the blood she spat out, it fell to the ground and turned black in just a breath of time, emitting a foul stench. The eldest senior apprentice, brother, furrowed his eyebrows. 7th junior apprentice sister, let go of me. The 1,000-faced saint turned her head and wiped the corners of her mouth. Senior apprentice brother, don't worry. It's just a minor injury. I'll be fine. She looked up and said, a solemn Saint Taoist actually attacked a junior like me. How fierce. Let me remind you, the master of the Peach Blossom Garden has a bad temper and has always been very protective of his own. If you do this, I'm afraid he will be very unhappy. Dragon Mountain walked over without expression, a wild aura raging around him. Even if the garden master comes in person, if you don't hand over Chinyu, you won't be able to leave. Now that a saint had made his move, the situation immediately became grim. Those who had quick reactions quietly retreated a little. The reason was simple. Although half Saint Dragon Mountain didn't have a resounding reputation, saints were a small circle. Even if they hadn't met before, most of them knew each other. All the saints knew a little about his strength and his usual style, but today he had jumped out with such a tough attitude. If someone said that there wasn't a problem behind him, none of them would believe it. No matter what the specific reason was, it was always good to be cautious so as to avoid being sucked into the storm. That's right, in the eyes of all the saints, since half-Saint Dragon Mountain had brazenly attacked, it would be difficult for today's matter to end peacefully. After all, regardless of whether it was presumptuous or not, there was one thing that the thousand-faced assassin was right about. That person in the peach blossom garden was a person who was protective of his own. He definitely wouldn't let it go after hurting his disciple under the watchful eyes of so many people. Just as the saints were thinking about this, a sneer suddenly rang out. "Oh, I'd like to see how you're going to stop me from taking them away." At first, the voice wasn't loud, as if it came from afar, but with every word spoken, the voice became several times louder. In the end, it was like a brilliant divine thunder, exploding above everyone's head. Rumble! The wild aura was terrifying. The garden master was here. Swish! Countless people raised their heads, but before they could lock onto the yard master's figure, the demigod Longshan let out a furious roar. With a loud boom, his entire body was like a wooden stake that was forcefully smashed into the ground. His hair was disheveled, and blood flowed out of his mouth and nose. His body couldn't help but tremble. The space suddenly distorted, and the garden master stepped out. Her eyes were cold and disdainful, like a divine eagle in the ninth heaven. "You." Puff! As soon as the last word was spoken, half-Saint Dragon Mountain couldn't suppress the rolling in his chest. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. She hadn't even shown herself, but she had smashed a dignified half-saint into the ground with a blow from a distance. Blood flowed out of his mouth and nose. Although they had long known the power and terror of a true saint at the peak, seeing this scene with their own eyes still made everyone's expression change greatly. The garden master looked around. "Or, who among you wants to join forces with Dragon Mountain to keep me here?" The junior cultivators had long been shocked by the terrifying aura of a true saint. Now their minds were roaring and their vision turned black. They felt so uncomfortable that they wanted to spit out blood. Of course, these words were said to all the saints present. Now, all of them narrowed their eyes and noses, pretending that they hadn't heard anything. Losing face. Well, it was very shameful, but it wasn't so hard to accept if everyone was losing face together. As for saying anything or expressing their dissatisfaction, it was better to forget it. At least in this situation, they couldn't jump out. Garden Master. This was the Peach Blossom Garden Master. Provoke him? Wasn't it good to be alive? Dragon Mountain suddenly laughed. With great difficulty, he struggled to free himself from the earth. In order to do this, he spat out a few more mouthfuls of blood, but his laughter became even louder. The Garden Master is indeed powerful, and your cultivation isn't something we can compare with. But does the Peach Blossom Garden really think that it can resist everyone after doing such a dangerous thing today? He took a deep breath and shouted, "Sage Scholatry, are you still not going to make a move? Do you want to watch helplessly as I am killed on the spot?" Bang! The sky suddenly darkened. The phantom of a towering ancient scholar tree appeared, and Sage Scholatry walked out. The garden master sneered. "I knew that without someone supporting me, a mere Dragon Mountain wouldn't dare to be so insolent towards me. Sage Scholatry, are you sure you want to fight me in your current state?" Sage Scholatry said, "Although my current state isn't good, it shouldn't be a problem for me to entangle the garden master for a period of time." He turned his head, a cold light flashing in his eyes. "Dragon Mountain, do you know what to do?" Longshan cupped his hands together. "Sage Scholatry, rest assured. Since I have made a move today, I will not leave myself a path of retreat." Bang! Space crazily collapsed inwards. A terrifying aura of destruction instantly shrouded Longshan. Countless branches drilled out, blocking the collapse of space. Sage Scholatry lifted a hand and grasped forward. "The garden master's opponent today is me." Bang! An invisible repulsive force instantly pushed everyone away. A distorted layer of light descended, covering the battlefield between the Garden Master and Sage Scolatry. This was a seal that the vast young world had placed to prevent the world from being seriously damaged. It was also known as the Permetha battlefield. Only those who had reached the Permetha battlefield and reached the limits of the Saint Realm were qualified to activate it. Long Shan didn't hesitate. His eyes locked onto his eldest senior brother and seventh senior sister. I said that even if the Garden Master came personally, she wouldn't be able to take you away. He lifted a hand and punched out. Roar! A loud roar came from the eldest senior brother's body. The azure dragon howled as it flew out, its body growing in the wind. In the blink of an eye, it became a 10,000-foot dragon. It opened its mouth and breathed out. There was a heaven-shaking explosion. The azure dragon tumbled away, its giant head swinging about. The scales on its body cracked and shattered. It had fallen into a deep slumber after absorbing the source of life. Now that it had awakened in this critical moment, although its strength had greatly increased, it still wasn't a match for a Saint Realm expert. Half Saint Longshan, is it? Don't think that just because my teacher is entangled, the Peach Garden has fallen to the point where you can bully them. Space shattered from within. The second senior brother's long hair fluttered in the wind as he walked out. His eyes were wild and cruel. He licked his lips and sneered. My junior brother hasn't been in the Peach Garden for long, but he has already slaughtered 2 saints. As his second senior brother, I haven't been able to make a move yet. I am under a great deal of pressure. Since Your Excellency Longshan has delivered himself to my doorstep today, I will accept your head. Before his voice fell, he stepped forwards. As if he had unsealed a seal within his body, a terrifying aura erupted. The complexions of the saints changed, and their pupils shrank. This was because at this moment, they all felt an intense threat emanating from their second senior brother. It was deadly enough. The Peach Garden's disciples had fought in the wilderness for 200 years, yet they had such strength. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, it would have been hard to believe. If the second disciple of the Peach Garden was so fierce, then the head disciple of the Peach Garden, Gao Zhuangzhong. No wonder there had always been rumors in the Saint Dao circle that although the Peach Garden had few disciples, their strength was at the peak of vast yang. Now that they saw it, they truly lived up to their reputation. Bang! With a loud explosion, half Saint Longshan roared out as he was forced backwards. A trace of blood flowed out from the corners of second senior apprentice brother's lips. But not only did the terrifying aura around him not weaken, but it became even stronger. A half-saint is only SOSO. Bang! The space beneath his feet shattered inch by inch as a violent force propelled him forward, like an arrow released from a bow. Longshan lifted a hand and pressed forward. A vast and mighty strength pressed down like a mountain. Second senior apprentice, brother laughed and punched out, not moving backwards at all. On the other hand, the dignified half-god Longshan stuffily coughed and his body swayed. At this time, there was a pained roar from the azure dragon. It rushed out to help second senior apprentice, brother, block the fist that suddenly appeared. Its massive body was pierced through and blood gushed out like a broken dam. A beast actually knows how to save others. The Peach Garden's teaching standards are quite good. The person who spoke was shrouded in black shadows, completely isolating his aura so that he couldn't be sensed by the outside world. But just now, this person had punched out and pierced through the azure dragon's hard body, nearly splitting it in half. A half-saint, this was another half-saint that was even stronger than Longshan. All the saints present felt their hearts race. They stared at the 2 true saints fiercely battling on the other shore battlefield. Longshan and the mysterious half-saint attacked one after another. Was it really just to kill the Peach Garden disciples and take revenge? No, although the Peach Garden disciples had a high status. In the eyes of saints, they still didn't have enough weight. Or perhaps they were preparing. Even with the powerful hearts of saints, When they thought of this, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Slaying a saint, and their target was a peak Permitha, true saint like the Peach Garden Master. If this was true, then just the strength they saw so far wasn't enough. In other words, it was likely that there were even more terrifying characters hidden in the shadows. Their mouths were dry, and their chests were pounding like thunder. The saints tasted bitter in their mouths. They felt as if they had fallen into some bottomless vortex. If they weren't careful, there was a chance they would be sucked in and end up without even bones left. It was clearly just that the juniors of the Lost Garden had suffered heavy casualties, and everyone had come here in anger to find the truth. So, how did it suddenly turn into this situation? Could it be that the fourth great war of the Divine Path was about to begin? It was very simple. If they couldn't kill the Yard Master today, she would definitely take revenge, and the entire vast young world would fall into turmoil. The second senior brother looked up to the sky and laughed. His violent aura suddenly soared again. Countless small blood vessels on the surface of his skin burst, and beads of blood seeped out of his pores. A half-saint is just a half-saint after all. So what if there are two of them? 100 battles in the wilderness can still kill them. Humph! The half-saint, who was shrouded in a black shadow, sneered and suddenly disappeared. Long Shan growled and pounced forward. Today, 2 half-saints had joined forces to kill a junior below the Divine Path. This was simply unheard of. This also confirmed the speculation of the saints before. In order to achieve their goal of killing the saint, they were willing to do anything. Since they wanted to kill the Yard Master, they had to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, leaving no hidden dangers. Boom! The second senior brother's figure retreated rapidly. Blood kept spurting out of his mouth and nose, and his chest revealed his white bones. Opposite him, Long Shan's face was heavily punched, and his facial features were distorted. The half-saint, who was shrouded in a black shadow, kept coughing violently. Obviously, he wasn't unscathed. Awesome. Awesome. Come on, let's fight again. The half-saint Long Shan spat out several broken teeth, and a trace of fear appeared in his eyes. This lunatic. Let's join forces and kill him first. The half-saint, who was shrouded in a black shadow, nodded with a hideous smile. Without warning, the space in front of him suddenly shattered. A palm drilled out of it, plunged into the darkness, and grabbed his neck. Puff! The darkness was like a punctured balloon. It directly burst and dissipated, revealing a pale face full of shock and anger. Chinyu, who was dressed in a blood-red robe, stepped out. His eyes were as cold as midwinter. How dare you touch my second senior brother? Chapter 1299. The half-step saint who was exposed suddenly widened his eyes, revealing endless fear. I am... He couldn't finish his words. With a cracking sound, his neck twisted at an exaggerated angle. A terrifying power instantly blasted into his body. All life was annihilated wherever it passed. His eyes quickly dimmed, and even his soul was torn to pieces. The world was deathly silent. At this moment, even the sound of breathing disappeared. Everyone's eyes widened as they looked at the scene in front of them. Their hearts shook like a tide, rumbling and roaring. The vast young world had existed for countless years. Although saints were supreme, they had experienced at least 3 cycles of saints falling. Naturally, the number of people who died was not small. But when had saints actually been reduced to being weak like chickens and ducks that could be casually crushed by others and perish just like that? But no one thought that this was the truth. It had happened in front of them, and everyone had seen it with their own eyes. A saint had died just like that, and the killer wore a blood-red robe called Second Apprentice Brother Chinyu. He was Chinyu. How was this possible? At the East Sea's birthday banquet, Chinyu had killed a saint on the spot, shaking the St. Dao circle. At that time, he had used all his strength and barely managed to do it. But today, he had arrived by shattering space. He raised his hand and clenched his fist. With a sneer, he had killed him. The process seemed simple, but it represented overwhelming strength. Otherwise, did he really think that the neck of a half-step saint was so easy to crush? If you didn't believe it, you could try. Let alone crushing the neck of a half-step saint. You would be lucky if you weren't crushed on the spot. How much time had passed since the East Sea's birthday banquet? Qin Yu's strength had reached the point where he could crush a half-step saint with one hand. Wasn't this speed of improvement a bit too exaggerated? No, exaggerated was no longer enough to describe everyone's current emotions. Abnormal, heaven-defying, inhuman, unbelievable, terrifying, all sorts of words tumbled in their minds. But just as they had said, no matter how shocked they were, this was something they had seen with their own eyes. Another saint had died at Qin Yu's hands. That was two. No, Peach Garden too had previously said that his junior brother had killed 2 saints in a row. In other words, at least 3 saints had died at his hands. For a time, everyone's eyes gathered on Qin Yu, full of shock and horror. He let go and allowed the corpse to fall to the ground. Then he turned to Long San. "It's your turn now." With one step, the space within a small area instantly collapsed. It was as if a huge mouth had suddenly opened and swallowed the Dragon Mountain semi-sage. The purpose of the space collapse was not to kill him, but to trap him and make him unable to escape. "Save me." Half-sage Dragon Mountain screamed out in pain. He had personally witnessed the half-sage die beneath the black shadow. He didn't have any confidence he could block Qin Yu's strike. Bang! The bloody light instantly erupted, and it was so dense that it seemed to have materialized. The terrifying stench of blood spread out, bringing with it a murderous aura that caused people's hearts to tremble. He brazenly tore space apart and collapsed, blocking in front of Longshan. In the next moment, a terrifying explosion suddenly erupted like a thunderclap. Puff! The Dragon Mountain half-sage, who was close, vomited blood. His eyes widened in disbelief. Impossible! This was absolutely impossible. Qin Yu actually possessed such terrifying strength. The bloody light faded away, revealing the figure within. It was the Netherworld saint who had projected himself into the Lost Garden not too long ago. His expression was calm and his eyes were full of praise. "I never thought that a mere junior like you would actually possess such strength. It seems." His voice paused and a red light flashed in his eyes. "Qin Yu, today my peach garden will not be able to escape this calamity. If you are willing to change sides, I can accept you into the Netherworld Holy Lands and make you my first disciple. Your status will be even more glorious than it is today." Across from him, Qin Yu stopped retreating. He could feel the tumbling in his chest, but his heart actually calmed down. Although the Permitha, true, saint was strong, he was only SOO. Like this, he was filled with even more confidence. He laughed out loud and said, "Netherworld saint, there is no need to say such ridiculous words. I, Qin Yu, am a disciple of my peach garden. I will naturally fight side by side with the peach garden master and my fellow senior apprentice brothers and sisters. Moreover, with just the likes of you, you want to destroy my peach garden? You simply overestimate yourselves." The Netherworld saint shook his head and faintly sighed. "I originally wanted to spare your life, but what could I do?" The blood-red color in the depths of his eyes suddenly exploded. It was like 2 boundless seas of blood that instantly set off raging waves. His entire aura changed, becoming filled with ruthlessness and destruction. "Since that's the case, I will personally take action and grant you the fate of destruction along with my peach garden. You talk too much nonsense." Qin Yu roared and lifted his hand to strike forward. This scene caused the eyebrows of everyone present, including the many saints, to jump up uncontrollably as they secretly clicked their tongues. The Netherworld saint was one of the few tyrannical existences in the vast Yang world that could contend with the Peach Garden Master, Sage Scholatry, and other peak true saints. Yet, Qin Yu dared to be so presumptuous and even took the initiative to attack first. But then, thinking about it, he had single-handedly killed a half-saint and collided with the Netherworld saint. Moreover, he hadn't been injured at all, so he might have the qualifications to do so. The combat strength that erupted from the 200 battles in the Peach Garden had already shaken their minds. They never imagined that this Chinyu would be even more terrifying. He actually dared to look down on a true saint. Was the Peach Garden too abnormal, or had their understanding of this world become too backward? They always felt that they couldn't understand the young people nowadays. The Netherworld saint flicked his sleeves. Blood sea. Boom! Endless blood instantly exploded and whistled in all directions. In the blink of an eye, a boundless blood sea was formed. It was boundless and crimson. The thick smell of blood soared into the sky. The extremely terrifying destructive power made people's hearts tremble. A monstrous wave of blood suddenly erupted and directly swallowed Chinyu. Endless blood sea. One of the great magical powers of the Netherworld, sacred ground. It was condensed from one's own blood chi, and was extremely keen and poisonous. It had a terrifying corrosive ability. Once one fell into it, one would be suppressed by the blood sea and eventually be corroded into slag. With the Netherworld saint personally taking action, the power of the blood sea could be imagined. Even a half-saint would not be able to survive if he fell into it. Although Chinyu was strong, he was still a junior. How could he truly understand the terrifying means of the Permitha, true saint, now that he was directly suppressed by the blood sea? If he couldn't break free, he would probably die a violent death. Since it was the Netherworld saint who took action, how could he easily escape after being swallowed by the blood sea? But at this moment, the faces of the people who were deep in thought suddenly stiffened. A dignified, true saint only has this kind of means. It was Chinyu. Bang! With a loud explosion, the blood sea was forcefully torn apart. Chinyu, who had been swallowed, was completely undamaged and didn't seem injured at all. His expression was cold as he looked at the Netherworld saint. It isn't polite not to reciprocate. This fist is for you. With a punch, the world shook. A terrifying strength condensed into a single point, instantly piercing through space and forming a terrifying black line. Roar! With a roar, the Netherworld saint's body erupted with blood light, condensing into the figure of a blood demon. It lifted a hand and punched forward. Bang! One of the blood demon's arms exploded. It screamed, and its giant eyes stared at Chinyu without any fear. Its cruel and murderous aura became increasingly thick. The Netherworld saint frowned. Chinyu's display of strength was a bit unexpected. The blood sea he condensed couldn't injure Chinyu at all. Disregarding everything else, just the strength of Chinyu's body was amazing. Perhaps his guess was correct. That giant snake corpse, otherwise, there was no other explanation. How could a junior that could be easily crushed to death gain such terrifying strength in such a short period of time? The blood-red color in his eyes became even thicker. It was like magma deep underground, filled with endless heat and greed. As long as he could capture Chinyu and seize his body, then the position of ruler might be within reach. Blood demon, go! He lifted a hand and pointed forward. The blood demon roared and stepped forwards, breaking away from the Netherworld saint and fusing into the endless blood sea. Rumble, rumble. The entire blood sea wildly tumbled. Then, with a loud roar, the sea surface ruptured and the blood demon that had condensed its true form stepped out. Its eyes locked onto Chinyu, and it punched forwards. Chinyu sneered. A competition of mortal body? But he wasn't afraid at all. With a deep roar, his flesh and blood exploded and his bones began to expand. In the blink of an eye, he became a giant that surpassed 100,000 feet in height. His black scales were as black as the eternal night. His eyes also turned pure darkness, as if they led to an endless abyss. A wild and violent aura erupted. This was a top hunter from the abyss world. Today, it had finally completely awakened. The destructive and killing aura it released was even more terrifying than the blood demon in the Blood Sea. Without any hesitation, the abyssal titan plunged into the Blood Sea. In the blink of an eye, the two titans began to wildly slaughter each other. Loud booms rang out as if a myriad of thunderbolts had exploded. Terrifying energy fluctuations caused space to distort, and an invisible barrier seemed to appear, wrapping around Blood Sea and the two terrifying figures within it. This caused one's vision to become blurry. This was the Permetha battlefield? No, it wasn't complete, but at least there was a rough outline. If his strength was just a bit stronger, it could completely condense. Qin Yu had transformed into a 100,000-foot-tall giant and slaughtered his way into the Blood Sea to fight the Blood Demon. But from start to finish, his true opponent had been the Netherworld Saint. Now, this was because the battle between the two sides had almost caused the Permetha battlefield to descend. Didn't this mean that the terrifying strength that erupted from this battle had been determined by the will of the vast young world to be a battle between true saints of the other shore? Although they already knew that Qin Yu was strong through the previous events, strong enough to kill a half-saint powerhouse with a single hand, it was only now that everyone regained their composure. So Qin Yu was strong to this degree, comparable to a true saint. This realization instantly set off raging waves in their minds. It was as if even thinking had become incomparably difficult. A true saint, a mere junior, in such a short period of time, actually possessed such terrifying strength. What exactly happened in the Lost Garden? Obviously, the crux of the matter was here. It was even to the extent that the sudden occurrence today of Sage Huai and the Netherworld Saint joining hands to annihilate the Peach Garden was probably related to this matter as well. The two great saints most likely already knew something, and it was precisely because of this that they brazenly attacked. This was some kind of harvest that even a true saint would not hesitate to risk his life. Thinking of this, everyone's heartbeat suddenly accelerated, their mouths dry, and their eyes blazed. If they could obtain it, would it be difficult for them to break through to true saint? They were afraid that the benefits would be far greater than this. Didn't they see that Qin Yu, a mere junior, could contend against a true saint after obtaining it? If it was in their hands, it would definitely be even stronger. That's right, a true saint was terrifying. Their strength far surpassed that of a half-saint struggling in the sea of bitterness. But this didn't mean that the saints present didn't have the qualifications to intervene. If this was the case, then there wouldn't be such a stable Saint Dao circle in the vast young world. True saints were powerful and respected, but the dignity and strength of a half-saint was also recognized. This wasn't just because, if a half-saint wanted to escape, a true saint might not be able to easily kill them. More importantly, if a half-saint was trapped in the Sea of Bitterness, they could use the Sea of Bitterness as a medium to resist enemies. As long as enough half-saints participated, they could even forcefully pull a true saint-level powerhouse into the Sea of Bitterness. A true saint had already reached the other shore. Their great Tao had condensed into one, turning into the great Tao that pierced through the Sea of Bitterness. If they were forcefully pulled back, the great Tao and the Sea of Bitterness would no longer be compatible, and a conflict would inevitably erupt. At best, the true saint's great Tao would be damaged, and at worst, the Sea of Bitterness would shatter them. This was the key reason why half-saints and saints were able to remain independent for countless years. They were able to exist in the vast young world in a relatively transcendent manner. They were natural allies. And it just so happened that there were many half-saints outside the Lost Garden today. If everyone joined forces, it wouldn't be difficult for them to resist one or two true saint-level powerhouses. In other words, they had the qualifications to enter the arena today. As for the benefits, everyone wanted to take it for themselves. But even if they couldn't, they could still divide it up afterwards. It was better than having it taken by a junior from Peach Blossom Garden and become a terrifying existence that stood above them in a single leap. This last point was likely hidden in the darkest depths of the hearts of all the saints today. Amir Chinyu of Peach Blossom Garden, Amir Jr., had suddenly risen to fame in just a short period of time. What qualifications did he have? The saints looked at each other and then separated. Although they didn't do anything and no one said anything, they all understood what they were thinking. A loose but formidable alliance was instantly formed. Offending a true saint was indeed terrifying, but as long as there were enough benefits, there was nothing a cultivator didn't dare to do, and a half-saint was no exception. Master, the eyes of those onlookers have turned red. You must end this quickly. Otherwise, if they are drawn into the arena, I fear the situation will spiral out of control. The stone pagoda's dignified voice sounded out in Qin Yu's mind. The old turtle had been reborn and obtained a suitable mortal body. Like this, he was able to live freely in this world. It would be a lie to say that the stone pagoda wasn't envious at all. But first, this depended on luck, and second, after the shadow of the abyss left, the one closest to Qin Yu had become the stone pagoda. It was hard to distinguish between the gains and losses, but at least for now, the stone pagoda was satisfied. He was satisfied with his current state, and even more satisfied with the strength that Qin Yu had erupted with today. He hadn't been defeated in a fierce battle against a true saint. Even if the Netherworld saint wasn't in his peak state because his Tao accumulations had exploded, this was still powerful enough. Powerful enough that he even had the qualifications to begin taking revenge for the blood grudges of the past. The stone pagoda certainly had to protect such a Qin Yu. If anyone dared to touch him now, the stone pagoda would be the first to jump out and fight with everything it had. This boy was his greatest hope. He absolutely could not allow anything to happen to him. So, even though he was helpless in this fierce battle, the stone pagoda didn't remain idle. After sensing that something was wrong with the saints, he immediately sent a sound transmission to warn them. Chapter 1300. A sharp light flashed in the Abyss Titan's eyes. To be honest, today's situation was beyond his expectations. Sage Scholatry and Netherworld Saint had joined forces with Longshan and the unlucky guy he had just killed. Did they think they could destroy the Peach Garden? What a joke! How could a true Nirvana saint be killed so easily? As long as the Yardmaster was alive, the Peach Garden would be free of worries. No one wanted to face the revenge of a true saint. If Sage Scholatry, who had already fallen out with the Peach Garden, and Netherworld Saint, who might have guessed the truth, had the confidence to take the risk, then what about Longshan and the unlucky guy? They were just two semi-saints. He could kill them like chickens, and they would be even worse than the Yardmaster. Since these two dared to join in, it was clear that they knew of the situation. They were very certain that the Peach Garden would not be able to escape this calamity. In other words, besides Sage Scholatry and Netherworld Saint, there must be others who had attacked the Peach Garden. There must be at least one true Nirvana Saint, or even two. Therefore, at this moment, Qin Yu transformed into the Abyss Titan and attacked violently, as if he didn't care about Netherworld Saint at all. But in fact, he was very cautious. Therefore, the name 9 heads that followed him wasn't very appropriate. After all, there was a shadow from the abyss hiding under the skin. Therefore, the shadow of the abyss had been hiding in the dark. He was closely monitoring the world, trying to find the hidden target. If there was only one true saint hiding in the dark, the situation today might be under control. But if there were two or more, Qin Yu would choose to escape without hesitation. He believed that the Yardmaster would make the same decision. This had nothing to do with being timid or losing face. If one knew that it was impossible to do something, it was not courage but stupidity. Protecting oneself was the best strategy. As long as he and the Yardmaster were safe, even if they were defeated today, no one would dare to touch the Peach Garden. Otherwise, what awaited them would be a crazy revenge that would not rest until one side was dead. The saints joining forces might be an opportunity to disrupt the opponent's rhythm and make the situation completely out of control. Perhaps it would be better to make use of this opportunity. The shadow of the abyss hadn't sent any messages. It was obvious that the hidden person was still waiting for an opportunity, and a patient hunter was often more dangerous. Rumble. The sea of blood boiled, and a violent energy surged in all directions. It was as if it wanted to overturn the entire world and completely crush it into powder. The more intense the battle, the more he could clearly feel the boundless strength contained within Qin Yu's body. The netherworld saint's blood red eyes became increasingly thick, nearly flowing out from them. This junior definitely couldn't be let off. The netherworld saint had already sensed the gazes from the Permitha battlefield. There was also another gaze that was wandering around Qin Yu's body. Clearly, his current performance had already attracted the attention of some people. Some people couldn't help but have other thoughts. He licked his lips, revealing his scarlet tongue and white teeth. Instantly, he gave off a tyrannical feeling. It looked like he couldn't delay any longer. If he attracted the attention of other old fellows, the situation today might change. The netherworld saint raised his hand and pointed a finger at the sea of blood. Boom! The entire sea of blood instantly ignited. All the blood evaporated under the high temperature and turned into a bloody mist that filled the sky. Blood! Demon roared and leapt into the endless blood mist. In the next moment, the fog condensed and a straight path appeared. Below it, countless phantoms of the dead howled in grief. A terrifying slaughter aura was released, causing one's ears to ring. It was like they were on the edge of the abyss of destruction and could be swallowed up at any moment. True divine great Tao. The netherworld saint walked the path of slaughter to form his Tao. His entire life of cultivation was built upon slaughter. The cries and despair of trillions of dead people supported his Tao. Before, it was said that the strongest aspect of a saint was their own great Tao. At this time, the netherworld saint used the slaughter great Tao to suppress Qin Yu with everything he had in order to prevent any accidents from occurring. Even if he had to pay an additional price in addition to damaging his own Tao, he didn't hesitate to do so. No matter what, he had to suppress Qin Yu. But the strongest aspect of a Tao was also the life gate of a saint. Once the great Tao was damaged, being severely wounded was the lightest result. But if the injuries were serious enough to cause the great Tao to collapse, there was a risk of death. Bang! The great Tao came crashing down like a sword. A terrifying slaughter aura instantly pierced through the mind. The wails of the dead below seemed to tear apart one's eardrums. Its target was the abyssal titan that Qin Yu had transformed into. It seemed as if it wanted to kill this top abyssal hunter on the spot. Within his chest, his heart wildly beat, pushing the blood in his body to rush through his body at an astonishing speed. Qin Yu could feel the terror that came from the netherworld saint's slaughter great Tao. Terror. It was shaped like a sword, but in truth it was a purgatory of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. It seemed as if the slaughter great Tao had arrived to kill him, but Qin Yu knew that the netherworld saint wanted to suppress him. No matter what, he could not be swallowed up by his opponent's great Tao. Otherwise, even if he was supported by his body of rules and had a fully awakened abyssal titan true body, he still wouldn't be able to resist the refinement of a true saint's great Tao. This was because within this great Tao was a nearly independent world. Within it, the netherworld saint was the ruler of all living beings. Dodging was impossible. Once the true saint, great Tao attacked, it would instantly lock onto one's aura. Either he forcefully resisted it, or he would be sucked into it with no chance of survival. Apart from this, there was no other choice. This was also the terrifying aspect of the true saint, great Tao. As long as one wasn't a match, there was no chance of victory against a true saint. It was clear that the netherworld saint had absolute confidence in his own realm, or rather, in the might of the slaughter great Tao. After all, even if Qin Yu obtained the powerful strength of the snake corpse, how much of it could he truly control in such a short period of time? It might not be obvious in a confrontation of brute force, but when it came to the level of the saint great Tao, he would definitely pale in comparison. But what the Netherworld saint didn't know was that in the Lost Garden, Qin Yu was on the verge of collapse and death. Finally, he broke through and stood up, completely condensing his body of rules. At the same time, his true divinity Tao cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds, breaking through the legendary limit and reaching the unprecedented level of the galaxy divine seal. Thus, Qin Yu didn't simply obtain strength now, but had truly transformed it into something that belonged to him. Otherwise, the Netherworld saint would have thought twice before making this decision. But unfortunately, there was no such thing as otherwise in this world. The moment the Netherworld saint sacrificed his great Tao, the entire situation suddenly took a turn. If the so-called saint-slaughtering war was just some half-sages struggling in a sea of bitterness, what meaning would it have? Naturally, it had to have the head of a true saint. Only then would it be worthy of its name. The abyssal titan punched the slaughter-great Tao above its head. As it roared, everyone was shocked to discover that every scale on its body was actually shining. The pitch-black scales emitted light. This was already shocking enough, but more importantly, there seemed to be countless lines within this light. These lines were constantly combining and decomposing, repeating this process with trillions of changes. On the altar, the scales of the spirit snake's corpse could also glow. However, that was only pure light. It wasn't as profound and obscure as the countless lines in front of him that allowed him to sense the extraordinary with just a glance. Of course, this didn't mean that the light emitted by the abyssal titan was stronger or of a higher level. On the contrary, this was a sign that Qin Yu hadn't completely grasped the power of his body of rules. The rules were everywhere, forming the vast Yang world. But in this world, one couldn't see any traces of the rules. Simply put, having substance and formlessness was the true realm. But even then, the abyssal titan's scales emanated light, and it was like a dam that stood before it and forcefully blocked the descending slaughter grand Tao. No matter how the phantoms of the dead howled miserably, they were unable to take another step forward. Hum! Hum! Space violently twisted. The blurry outline of the Permitha battlefield completely condensed, wrapping around both sides. Body of rules. The Netherworld saint blurted out. His pupils shrank in shock. For a dignified, true saint to lose his composure like this, it was clear how shaken his heart was. The stone pagoda had once said that the body of rules had another name, heaven forging. This meant that one could forge their own body into an existence comparable to the heavens and earth. In truth, this was only one of many similar names that had appeared in the vast Yang world. The true divinity path walked the path of constantly perceiving the world rules and fusing them into the soul. This was so that one didn't have to follow the orthodox path of cultivation and forcefully increase a cultivator's strength. After this path was verified in the craziest period of time, there were people who proposed a metamorphosis, a different cultivation path, since it could be passed by constantly fusing the rules into the soul and continuously increasing the strength of a cultivator. There was no reason that the physical body couldn't. And that was likely the starting point of the concept of the body of rules. Following that, a series of cultivation methods were born. Unfortunately, the cultivation of the body of rules was much more difficult than the true divinity path. Moreover, both had the same limitation. While one could increase their strength, they couldn't increase the cultivator's lifespan. In fact, the true divinity path and the body of rules could be said to be a perfect cultivation method. One was to strengthen the soul, while the other was to forge a large and sturdy bottle. Unfortunately, no matter how perfect it was still a mistake. No one could walk down this path. The Netherworld saint had lived for an extremely long time. It was said that he had achieved the Tao a long time ago. He was even more ancient than existences like the Yard Mistress and Sage Scholatry, who had experienced 3 divine Tao Samsara. Therefore, with just a glance, he could see the depth of the power that Qin Yu had erupted with. Because of this, he was even more shocked. The body of rules. There was actually someone who had cultivated the body of rules. The Saint Tao coexisted with the heavens and earth. They were nearly immortal and indestructible. They often encountered bottlenecks and found it difficult to improve. The Netherworld Saint had once carefully comprehended the body of rules over a long period of time and had a deep understanding of it. In theory, to condense the body of rules, one needed to temper one's body to the point that it was nearly one with the heavens and earth. The difficulty was inconceivably high. Even a true saint couldn't find the slightest possibility of success, unless one had a powerful enough strength that contained the source of the heavens and earth's great Tao rules. If one used it to temper and fuse with one's body, there might be a chance. If the Netherworld Saint was only 30 to 40% confident before, then he was almost certain that the snake corpse he saw when his projection descended was the thing he was thinking of, an innate spirit. Only such a legendary thing could help Qin Yu forge the body of rules. It turned out that the Lost Garden actually hid the corpse of an innate spirit. No wonder the ancient life form race could defy the heavens and change their fate, forcefully continuing their race until now. That unfilial son, Knight, walking could be forgiven now. He didn't hesitate to use his life as the price to deliver information about the innate spirit to him. Good, very good. The Netherworld Saint took a step forward. Like the blood demon, he instantly fused with the slaughter great Tao. In the next moment, a terrifying blood flame soared into the sky. His slaughter great Tao was burning fiercely at this moment. The fuel was the Tao accumulation of a true saint. If he could send something, others could too. There was no time to delay. He had to immediately imprison Qin Yu. Otherwise, with the strength of an innate spirit, even a ruler might make an exception and attack him. The Netherworld Saint's body fused with the great Tao. He crazily burned his Tao accumulation, instantly increasing the might of the slaughter great Tao by several times. The defensive dam formed by the light instantly warped violently. Cracking sounds rang out as the scales on the abyssal titan's body continuously cracked at this moment. Although Qin Yu still had scruples about the true saint hiding in the shadows, the current situation didn't allow him to hold back any longer. The abyssal titan roared. A divine seal phantom condensed above its head, dazzling like a great sun. Countless lines fell down like tassels on a crown. Each line shined with a dazzling light, like a river of stars. Then, countless star phantoms appeared around the divine seal, finally turning into a brilliant river of stars. The starlight and the light released by the abyssal titan scales fused together, forming a powerful defense that forcefully blocked the burning slaughter great Tao. Star River Divine Seal. The moment before this voice sounded out, Qin Yu received a warning from the abyssal shadow. Master, be careful. So, at this critical moment, the abyssal titan roared out loud. It punched out, colliding with the darkness that tore through space. Indeed, it was a mass of pure darkness, thick and viscous like liquid ink. As it surged, it released an astonishing aura. Like this, the third true saint had appeared. There was a heaven-shaking explosion. The abyssal titan drew back. The darkness was like maggots in its bones. After it touched its body, it began to spread upwards from its fist. The darkness violently shook, as if great waves were set off. A low and gloomy voice sounded out. Forget our previous agreement. You can have his mortal body, but I want his soul. The target of these words was clearly the Netherworld Saint. He furrowed his eyebrows for a moment before composing himself. Good. The body of rules was first, and the Star River Divine Seal was next. What Qin Yu revealed was something that even a true saint would covet. Since the other party had already made a move, they wouldn't give up so easily. If they fought amongst themselves, it would only lead to accidents. Agreeing was the best choice. This sort of decisiveness wasn't something an ordinary person could achieve. Only this one. Yes. Are you sure? Master, rest assured. This little one is willing to use my head as a guarantee. Qin Yu's heart calmed. If an extreme character from the death-fearing world dared to say such words, then it was clear he had full confidence in himself. This darkness true saint was the final strength that had been hidden today. The situation was much better than he imagined. Two true saints. Perhaps he wouldn't need to run. Chapter 1301. One had to pick the soft persimmon to pinch. The old saying passed down from ancient times had some truth to it. Therefore, Chinyu raised his head and looked at the burning massacre Tao. In comparison, the netherworld saint, whose Tao was damaged and who was burning his Tao connotation to unleash his horrifying strength, was a relatively qualified soft persimmon. The darkness true saint's attack worsened the situation instantly. The two true saints had joined hands to kill Chinyu. The power that the two true saints could unleash was not as simple as 1 + 1. Even the yard master had to avoid it, temporarily. Although Chinyu had shown his strength to fight against the netherworld saint, they were still not optimistic about him. Or more precisely, the moment the darkness true saint appeared, everyone was worried about Chinyu. It was precisely because of this that what happened next caused them to widen their eyes in disbelief. The abyss titan roared and reached out to the top of his head. The Milky Way rolled up and turned into a Milky Way long stick with the divine seal as the center point. Without any hesitation, the abyss titan waved the Milky Way long stick fiercely towards the massacre Tao. The next moment, there was a deafening explosion. Blood-red flames rolled violently. Countless phantoms of the dead were shattered into nothingness in the collision. Facing the two true saints alone, Chinyu did not turn around to escape. Instead, he took the initiative to attack first. Crazy, he must be crazy. Doesn't he know that he is courting death by doing this? Unlike the shocked crowd, the two true saints on the battlefield instantly understood what Chinyu meant, and their faces darkened. The netherworld saint sneered because he had already guessed that he had been treated as a soft persimmon by Chinyu. In comparison, the darkness true sage seemed to be more valued. However, as a dignified true sage, he was actually ignored and cast aside. No matter how one looked at it, this wasn't something to be happy about. Arrogant young man. In a low voice, the netherworld saint's cold face appeared in the burning bloody flames. The massacre Tao pressed down. The darkness true saint's voice came from the darkness that was as sticky as liquid. It has been many years since anyone dared to look down on me. It was impossible for them to maintain their identity, noble character, or disdain to join hands to deal with a young man. Since they had already attacked, they would not care about these. It was better for Chinyu to be arrogant. If he wholeheartedly wanted to run away, things would only become more troublesome. The two true sages had seen many cases of people being overwhelmed by the sudden increase in power. Hence, they weren't surprised by Chinyu's actions. Since he's courting death, I'll send him on his way. Bang! Darkness instantly erupted. Like a raging river, it swept towards Chinyu. What a great Mr. Ninth of the Peach Garden! What happened next caused the eyebrows of all the spectators to twitch. Their eyes widened in disbelief. The abyssal titan didn't care about the dark torrent sweeping toward him from behind. He raised the Milky Way staff in his hand and stomped on the ground. His body soared into the sky and collided with the slaughter-great Tao that was burning and emitting a boundless destructive aura. The shrill howls of the phantoms of the dead were drowned out, although they recovered in an instant and filled the eardrums again. The netherworld saint's expression changed slightly. Others might not be able to see it clearly, but everything was in his perception. When the abyssal titan's Milky Way staff collided, the phantoms of the dead that supported the slaughter-great Tao were instantly shattered. These phantoms of the dead were formed by the fusion of the souls and thoughts of the living beings that he had slaughtered. They had been smelted into a part of the great Tao. As long as the great Tao wasn't destroyed, it was immortal. Even if it was shattered, it could be reformed. But at this moment, the netherworld saint found that these shattered phantoms of the dead were different from before. They had actually disappeared completely. As mentioned earlier, The phantoms of the dead were a part of the slaughter great Tao. In other words, after this collision, his slaughter great Tao had suffered permanent damage. This was definitely not normal. If the great Tao of a true sage was so easily damaged, how could it cross the sea of bitterness and support them to reach the other shore? It was Qin, or more precisely, the Milky Way staff in the hands of the abyssal titan that he had transformed into, that had some kind of terrifying attribute that had caused serious damage to the great Tao. What was going on? The netherworld, Saint couldn't figure it out. The only thing that made him feel a little relieved was that he wasn't the only one who attacked today. If Qin attacked with all his strength, he would definitely not be able to resist the killing attack from the darkness true sage. He heaved a sigh of relief. But in the next moment, the netherworld saint's face stiffened. Facing a mere junior, he actually had this feeling of relief. He didn't want to admit it, but this was the truth. Now, the netherworld saint had a faint intuition that if he hadn't joined forces with the darkness true sage, he would have been the one who would have been defeated in the end. After all, the damage to the great Tao didn't seem to be too great at first. But as the battle continued, it would continue to accumulate. Once it reached an invisible warning line, it meant that what followed would be a price that even a true sage couldn't afford. Qin had to die, not only because of the power in his body, but also because from this moment on, Qin had become a hidden danger in the eyes of the netherworld saint. After today's matter, the two sides were already mortal enemies. If he couldn't kill Qin, he was bound to suffer a backlash. Qin, who had just obtained the power of the pre-celestial spirit, was already so powerful. If he was given enough time to grow, who knew what the future would be like? Bang! The river of darkness crashed down. The abyssal titan's scales erupted with light. It violently twisted and emitted a pained roar. Then there was nothing else. The darkness true sage had joined forces with the netherworld saint to launch an attack against Qin, but it was clear that they hadn't been able to cause any substantial damage to him. This was simply preposterous. The netherworld saint's first thought was that the darkness true sage was playing tricks on him and wasn't willing to help. In fact, the darkness true sage even had the thought of watching him fight Qin to the death in order to reap the benefits. Otherwise, how could the mighty Permitha true sage's attack be so soft and weak, unable to cause any damage at all? Did he think that he was an idiot? Thousand Nether! The netherworld saint roared. This was clearly the name of the darkness half-sage. His tone was icy cold. What are you doing? Within the liquid darkness, the thousand Nether saint frowned. Hearing this roar, his complexion darkened. If he had really planned to do something, it would have been fine if he had been discovered. But he clearly hadn't done anything. This was truly depressing. But now he absolutely could not have any internal strife. The thousand Nether saint took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. His eyes erupted with a sharp light as he stared at Qin. There is something strange about this junior. When my flood of darkness struck him, I only had 30% of my strength left. Without waiting for him to finish speaking, the abyssal titan roared again and rushed out with the galaxy staff in its hand, raising its hand and slamming it down. Its target was still the netherworld saint. Bang! There was a heaven-shaking explosion. The abyssal titan was forced back, but the netherworld saint's face that appeared in the burning blood flames was distorted by the tumbling flames. Because of this collision, a large number of dead phantoms were shattered. Moreover, what was even more terrifying was that the netherworld saint recalled the pained roar of the slaughter great Tao. 3 strikes. It was just 3 strikes, but they had actually injured his great Tao. Thousand Nether, if you don't use your full strength, then I won't accompany you any longer. In the darkness, the thousand Nether saint took a deep breath. In the next moment, endless darkness descended upon this world. His Tao was the darkness of the world to begin with. It could swallow all things. The abyssal titan's massive body was instantly submerged in darkness. In the next moment, This endless darkness was like boiling water in an iron pot, wildly tumbling about. Rumble, rumble. Up in the sky, the wind surged and the clouds churned. Thunder and lightning exploded, lighting up the faces of the people below in astonishment. Another true saint had summoned the great Tao to descend. The amount of power gathered here was terrifying enough to trigger a warning from the heavens and earth. This was a level higher than the Permitha battlefield. This meant that the vast young worlds will believed that their battle would cause irreparable damage to the world itself. This did mean that the vast young worlds would directly intervene in a battle between true saints. But if one insisted on ignoring the warning and caused damage to the world, there would inevitably be karma added to their bodies. Before everyone could regain their composure, there was a miserable scream. Everyone who was shaken to begin with turned their heads. They saw that where a cultivator was, space suddenly shook. It was like a calm surface of water being blown about by a gentle breeze. These ripples were incomparably subtle and shouldn't have possessed too great a lethality. But what happened next left everyone's scalps tingling. They saw that the cultivator that was wrapped up in the spatial ripples instantly disintegrate. It was like he was cut into countless pieces by countless rapidly vibrating blades. Then he continued to disintegrate, turning into a fog of blood. At this point, the miserable screams came to a stop, but everyone's faces were drained of blood. Before everyone could catch their breaths and compose themselves, there was a loud buzz in space. The ripples appeared once more. This time, 3 cultivators were sucked in, one of them even a half-saint. Angry roars erupted. The half-saint that was sucked in forcefully tore through space to escape. He spat out great mouthfuls of blood, his entire body turning into a bloody gourd. As for the 2 cultivators beside him, they were clearly juniors. But they didn't have the strength and instantly turned into a fog of blood. World resonance, this is world resonance. Someone is deliberately using this method to divert the strength they have to bear. The blood-spitting half-saint angrily roared. The complexions of the saints changed. Without hesitation, they flicked their sleeves and led the cultivators around them to rapidly retreat. The so-called world resonance was an extremely powerful defensive technique. It could obtain the protection of heaven and earth and divert the strength one had to bear. When fighting with an enemy, it was equivalent to venting the opponent's attack to heaven and earth, greatly reducing the pressure on oneself. Of course, such a powerful technique couldn't be easily mastered. It had extremely high requirements for a cultivator's realm, strength, and comprehension of the rules of heaven and earth. Even among the saints, there were very few who could master it. For a moment, the faces of the saints turned ashen. They glanced at the half-saint who was still vomiting blood, their eyes filled with uncertainty. Someone was clearing the battlefield. It was very obvious that fighting in front of a group of half-saints wasn't something that made one feel happy. Driving them away would make it easier to divide the benefits after the dust settled to avoid any accidents. Who was it? Everyone's eyes gradually focused on the netherworld saint and the 1,000 nether saint. Their expressions became increasingly unfriendly. The yard master and the scholatry sage were fighting in the Permitha battlefield. Both sides were evenly matched. The terrifying shock waves of power were like tsunamis. There was no time for them to be distracted. As for Chinyu, although he had displayed extraordinary combat strength, he couldn't fight against the 2 true saints and was quickly suppressed. But he was still a junior. Although they didn't know how his strength had skyrocketed to this level. They didn't believe that he had mastered the world resonance. Nonsense. They were a group of half-saints who had lived for countless years, but they couldn't even touch the shadow of the world resonance. How could a junior like him be able to do it? Good luck was good, but in terms of cultivation aptitude, no one who could become a half-saint would think that they were inferior to others. Compared to them, a true saint was only born better or had better luck. Therefore, the most likely people to do this were the netherworld saint and the 1,000 nether saint. With this judgment, even the performance of the two true saints in the battle against Qin Yu could be explained. No wonder the two true saints couldn't suppress Qin Yu even when they joined forces. Obviously, the two of them had reached an agreement long ago. They deliberately held back and used the process of the battle to force the crowd to retreat. Thinking about the conversation between the Netherworld Saint and the 1,000 Nether Saint just now, it was definitely an act. That's right, a true saint is terrifying and we can't provoke them. But if they want to fool us with such crude methods, they're looking down on us too much. In any case, we are bitter sea half-saints. In the vast Yang world, we are also respected as saints. Everyone, the situation is clear. You and I either retreat or take a risk. A half-saint suddenly spoke, revealing everyone's thoughts. Now let's make our decision. Do you choose to leave or fight? No one spoke, but this silence was enough to show their attitude. There was indeed a great disparity between a half-saint and a true saint. If they fought desperately, even if 2 or 3 joined forces, they wouldn't have the strength to fight back against a true saint. But the cycle of the heavenly Tao always left a line. This line was that as long as there were enough half-saints, they could summon a terrifying strength that even a true saint wouldn't dare to provoke. That was the sea of bitterness. Bang! The auras of all the saints fused together. With a heaven-shaking explosion, the space above their heads twisted, as if some giant creature was about to forcefully squeeze out. Then it really squeezed out. The sea of bitterness descended. Everywhere one looked, there was a withered yellow color. It was like withered weeds under the frost of late autumn, or like fallen leaves that had fallen from the branches. The color of the sea of bitterness was a kind of desolation and silence. It was a yellow that revealed the decay of life, the decay of a dying tree. Just by looking at it, one could feel the life force within their bodies rapidly fading away. Then, a great fear rose up from the depths of their hearts. It was like a sea of annihilation, the end of all life. As long as one fell into it, their body and soul would be destroyed. As for half-saints, they were all trapped in this sea of bitterness. Although they were revered as saints by the world, they had to constantly suffer torment that gnawed at their bones. It was because of this that many half-saints joined forces and used themselves as a medium to forcefully summon the sea of bitterness. Chapter 1302. The moment the sea of bitterness arrived, the burning slaughter great Tao and the darkness that drowned everything violently shook at the same time. The great Tao pierced through the sea of bitterness, supporting the road to heaven and reaching the other shore. Strictly speaking, it was on the opposite side of the sea of bitterness. If the two sides didn't come into contact, they would be safe. But if they coexisted in the same place, their auras would naturally collide. Thus, when the sea of bitterness arrived, its aura caused the great Taos of the two true saints to tremble. Throughout the endless years of the vast Yang world, countless saints had been born. But there was only one sea of bitterness, and it had existed for eternity. There was no comparison between the two sides in terms of strength or level. No one had ever heard of a true saint's great Tao being able to withstand the sea of bitterness. Let alone colliding with it, it would be heaven-defying if the great Tao didn't collapse. It was because of this that the half-saints were able to enjoy the dignity and status of a half-step saint in the vast Yang world. The Netherworld saint's face roared in the blood flames. "This is not my doing." His sharp eyes fell on the sea of darkness. Just like the saints, the Netherworld saint didn't think Qin Yu could control the resonance of the world. In the darkness, a cold voice sounded, "It wasn't me." The saints were expressionless. The sea of bitterness above their heads roared. "We have no intention of offending true saints. It's just that, in the current situation, we have to join forces to protect ourselves. If we have offended you, I ask for your forgiveness." Although it was clear that they wanted to join forces to fight for it, they couldn't say it too directly. Saints had to leave some face. As long as both sides understood what they meant, it was fine. The netherworld saint coldly snorted, but didn't say anything. The existence of the Sea of Bitterness was the greatest threat and deterrence to true saints. He just couldn't figure out what Qian Yu wanted to do. He had deliberately given the saints a chance to fight for it. Was he trying to muddy the waters and seize the opportunity to stir up trouble? But why was he so confident? Did he have some trump card in his hand? Thinking of this, his heart turned cold and his eyes turned even colder. The darkness true saint's face was covered in frost. His eyes turned pitch black, as if they were formed from the endless darkness of the world. Netherworld saint, what a good netherworld saint. He was clearly the one causing trouble, but he dragged him down with him. What does he want to do? The situation was chaotic. He, the true saint of the Permetha continent, was actually in a fog and couldn't see anything clearly. Traces of uneasiness welled up in his heart as the darkness true divine's face turned even colder. He secretly warned himself that he had to be extra careful. Something was wrong today. Something big might happen. Qian Yu would never have thought that he would attract so many saints to the scene while he was completely ignorant, causing the netherworld and 1,000 nether saints to grow enmity and doubt each other. That's right, if the so-called resonance of the heavens and earth was referring to the spatial fluctuations from before, then it had indeed come from Qian Yu. Or it was more accurate to say that it came from within Qian Yu's body. Right now, it was burning with the strength of a pre-celestial spirit. An adult innate spirit had died countless years ago, and the energy within its body had been continuously extracted to maintain the existence of the lost garden. Normally speaking, even if the innate spirit was able to recover its strength on its own, it would still be at its weakest. At most, it would only be able to recover 30 to 40% of its full strength. But this corpse had given birth to a corpse spirit. It was unable to resist the power of the lost garden, but it could consciously restore itself. There was naturally a great disparity between passive and instinctive recovery and conscious absorption of energy from the outside world. This also caused the innate spirit corpse that Qian Yu absorbed to possess nearly all the strength it had when it was in its complete state. Because of this, by borrowing this massive strength to help the body of laws complete the destruction and reconstruction process, the innate spirit still had a great deal of strength left within its body. Thus, before the corpse spirit was forced to leave, it had said that most of its strength had been taken away. Even if it was only 20 to 30%, or even 10%, with the massive amount of strength that the innate spirit possessed, it was still a terrifying amount. And this portion of strength was currently stored within Qian Yu's body. It was because the body of laws had been destroyed and reconstructed that he was able to absorb almost all of it in a single gulp, leaving only a tiny bit to maintain the existence of the lost garden. After all, if all the strength was sucked dry and the lost garden collapsed on the spot, then disregarding the safety of his eldest senior apprentice brother, 7th senior apprentice sister, as well as the missing white phoenix, the commotion would instantly draw the attention of the entire vast Yang world. Perhaps even a ruler would descend. Qian Yu still thought that it was best to conceal the matter of the innate spirit. Cough, cough, he had spoken too much nonsense. In short, there was still a great deal of the innate spirit's strength that he hadn't yet absorbed. If it wasn't necessary, Qian Yu wasn't prepared to continue refining it. Rather, he wanted to use it as a hidden card or killing move. He never imagined that as soon as he left the Lost Garden, he would run into 2 true saints. Because if he didn't want to flee, or if he didn't want to be hammered into a bloody mess, he could only ignite the strength of the innate spirit in exchange for greater strength. It was because of this that Qian Yu was able to sweep up the rivers of stars in the skies, turning them into a stellar rod and using his abyssal Titan true body to forcefully resist the netherworld saints' slaughter great Tao. It was also because of this that he dared to ignore the darkness true saint and focus on pinching a soft persimmon. After Qian Yu comprehended the light and darkness as one and formed the body of laws. Although his darkness great Tao couldn't be compared to the darkness true saints, it could still offset 20% of his strength. As for what the darkness true saint said, he only had 30% of his strength left. The rest was directly thrown by Chinyu. The moment he ignited the innate spirit strength, Chinyu had a similar feeling as before, where he was about to merge with the world. However, this feeling was much weaker and far less intense than before. Then he discovered that he could transfer the strength that he had withstood to the world. This was something that he had discovered by accident. Overjoyed, Chinyu didn't have time to think too much and directly threw it out. He didn't even know what the resonance of the world was, let alone intentionally controlling it. Therefore, the cultivators who were sucked into it and died were really unlucky. They just happened to be standing in the wrong place. However, Chinyu wouldn't say these things, especially when he discovered that the saints had entered and summoned the sea of bitterness. The pressure on him was suddenly reduced by a large margin. The slaughter great Tao and the darkness great Tao that was drowning him were both suppressed to a certain extent. However, the sea of bitterness didn't affect him at all. Of course, this was a good thing. In the darkness, the abyss titan roared. A large amount of the innate spirit's strength in its body was instantly ignited. In exchange, a powerful force suddenly erupted from its body. The galaxy staff in its hand suddenly exploded with a bright light and fiercely smashed forward. The Thousand Nether Saint let out a muffled groan, and anger appeared on his face. If one looked closely, they would discover that there was more shock in his expression. This was because when the Abyss Titan in the darkness attacked him, he discovered that his darkness origin had actually been consumed. The Thousand Nether Saints' darkness origin was the same as the Netherworld Saint's dead shadow. They were both a part of the darkness great Tao. How could he not be shocked by this discovery? Chinyu could actually directly consume the true Saint Great Tao. If he hadn't experienced it himself, it would be simply unbelievable. Before he could think further, the Abyss Titan that was drowning in darkness roared and smashed its staff a second time. Another innate spirit strength was burned away. But that didn't matter. You still had plenty of innate spirit strength left in his hands. It could continue for several days. The Thousand Nether Saints' eyebrows jumped up. He could feel the Abyss Titan's incomparably tyrannical aura. After being submerged in darkness, it didn't weaken at all. In fact, its aura seemed to have become even stronger. In this situation, before he could use the darkness to refine and kill Chinyu, his great Tao would likely be shattered first. Just what was this boy hiding? How could he be so terrifying? He suddenly felt that participating in today's matter wasn't the right decision. Bang, the third strike. The Thousand Nether Saints' lips twitched. Without any hesitation, the darkness retreated and the Abyss Titan was released. What nonsense. If he continued to trap it, he wouldn't be trying to kill it. He would be sending himself to his death. The Abyss Titan broke free. It looked up and locked onto the slaughter great Tao. Without any hesitation, it roared and shot into the skies. The Thousand Nether Saint. It really was him. What did this bastard want to do? He had released Chinyu on his own initiative. A deep unease appeared in the Netherworld Saint's heart. He looked at the Abyss Titan. There was no time to do anything. He could only block this strike. Bang! The slaughter great Tao crashed down and collided with the galaxy staff. There was a light kacha that sounded in the depths of his heart. The Netherworld Saint's heart shrank and his face paled. It wasn't just a simple stacking of damage. It was as if the staff's damage to the great Tao was multiplying with every collision. He had been tricked. But why did the Thousand Nether Saint dare to scheme against him? Or did he have other preparations in secret? There was no time to think about it. The Netherworld Saint knew that he had to leave. A crack in the great Tao was a matter of life and death for a true saint. After all, everything a saint had was built on the great Tao. If the great Tao collapsed, they would perish. Thousand Nether, just you wait. Today's matter will not end here. You and I will settle this in the future. And Chinyu, I will not give up. You were lucky enough to escape today, but I will soon unite with the other true saints to make a comeback. I will not hesitate, even if I have to give up most of the benefits. The power of a connate spirit isn't something that a mere junior like you has the right to monopolize. Shwa. The blood flames that filled the skies instantly vanished, and the killing, great Tao vanished along with them. The netherworld saint's complexion paled, and he turned to leave without hesitation. Even if things ended like this, even if Qin fought 1 against 2 and forced the true saints to retreat, it was still enough for his name to shake vast Yang and for the entire world to see this new super-strong cultivator who had risen like the sun in the sky, someone who caused everyone to sigh in awe. But since this was a battle to slaughter a saint, how could he allow the soft persimmon he had chosen to escape so easily? Moreover, this soft persimmon had likely already confirmed the matter regarding the connate spirit. Whether it was to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, or to ensure his own future stability, there was no reason for him to let him escape. Of course, the more important reason was that Qin Yu discovered that he had underestimated the strength he currently possessed. In particular, the strength of the connate spirit within his body had yet to be completely burnt away. A true saint was only SOO. Formidable self-confidence was the first support he had. This was the only reason he dared to have the audacious thought of keeping the netherworld saint here. But if a true saint truly wanted to leave, wanting to keep them here was undoubtedly an extremely difficult matter. Even though Qin Yu's confidence had skyrocketed, he still didn't think he could accomplish this with his own strength. Luckily, he wasn't alone today. As the dignified master of the peach garden, even though he was entangled by sage scholatry and fought on the Permitha battlefield, he had been too silent since the beginning of the battle. He had been so silent that he had almost been forgotten by everyone. He no longer had the domineering and awe-inspiring aura from before. The Abyss Titan lifted a hand and grasped forward. Space shattered and wrapped around the netherworld saint, forcefully suppressing him for a breath of time. At the same time, there was a thunderous roar. "Honorable Master!" Boom! There was a heaven-shaking explosion. In a blurry scene, a figure was sent flying away. The Permitha battlefield shattered, and the Yard Master stepped out. His clothes were torn, and there was still blood at the corner of his mouth. But his eyes were cold and calm, like ancient ice, without the slightest fluctuation. Netherworld. As he shouted, the world rumbled, and the shadow of a peach tree that could support the heavens suddenly descended. The thick peach branch fell, and a peach blossom suddenly bloomed. It was like a giant mouth that swallowed the netherworld saint. Peach blossom. The netherworld saint's expression changed abruptly. A monstrous, blood-red light burst out of his body. "Yard Master, don't go too far. Do you really want to fight to the death?" The Yard Master was expressionless. He took a step forward and instantly merged with the peach tree phantom. "You forced me to do this? You forced me to do this." The netherworld saint's face was ferocious like a crazy demon. The blood-red light burst out of his body and seemed to overturn the entire sea of blood. Countless shrill howls sounded and distorted phantoms emerged from the blood-red light. Each of these phantoms was a creature that had died in the hands of the netherworld saint. Because he had killed to pursue the Tao, these creatures could not rest in peace as the great Tao of slaughter condensed. They were forcibly captured into the great Tao and driven by him to become a part of the netherworld saint's power. The Yard Master shouted in a low voice, "Qin Yu!" Although he didn't know how terrifying this peach blossom was, it was not difficult to judge from the netherworld saint's reaction that this thing could definitely threaten his life. Without any hesitation, the moment the Yard Master finished speaking, Qin Yu raised his hand and pointed forward. "Stop!" Boom! At this moment, the primordial spiritual power in his body burned wildly. In an instant, 10 clusters of it were burned into nothingness. But it was not a problem. As long as he could kill the netherworld saint, even 100 or 1,000 clusters of it would be worth it. Today, the peach garden was going to slaughter the saint and kill the true saint of the other shore to intimidate the vast Yang world. This was to let them know that the peach garden, which had been silent for countless years and seemed to be gentle and easy to bully, could still beat anyone to the ground when it turned hostile and make them cry for their father. The blood-red light burst out of the netherworld saint's body and suddenly stopped. His eyes widened in horror and disbelief. The law of time? No. In a battle between true saints, the difference of a millimeter was like the difference between heaven and earth. Although the descending power of time could only imprison the netherworld saint for one breath, it was enough for the yard master. The peach blossom whizzed over and swallowed the yard master. The moment the petals closed, the yard master could vaguely hear the netherworld saint's desperate howl. The peach blossom swallowed the saint. The peach blossom closed, the peach blossom withered, and the peach blossom turned to ashes. The netherworld saint also disappeared along with the peach blossom. As the petals turned to ashes, a monstrous blood-red light suddenly erupted from a single point. Countless blood-red, jade-like fragments, like jade brought out by a volcanic eruption, whizzed in all directions amidst the blood-red light. The Abyss Titan stretched out his hand and grabbed the largest piece. He put it away with a backhand and roared, "The true saint has fallen, and the great Tao has collapsed." These fragments are the peach garden's compensation for the fallen saints. From now on, we are even. Chapter 1303. Kill a true sage and shatter his great Tao as compensation. In terms of the level of apology, it was indeed very sincere. The space fell into silence. Rumble, thunder roared in the sky, and black clouds rolled crazily. This was the reaction of the vast young world after the true sage died. An extremely terrifying aura fluctuated in the air, causing one's heart to palpitate with fear. However, the heavenly lightning, or rather, the vast young punishment, did not descend. Under the sea of bitterness, the saints were shaken and their expressions changed. To be honest, no one had expected that the 3 true sages would join hands to destroy the peach garden, but the netherworld saint would be killed on the spot. 3 true saints had joined hands, yet they were still unable to do anything to the peach garden. Now, only Sage Huai and Sage Thousand Nether were left. Even if they joined in, they might not have the confidence to succeed. Moreover, the sages suddenly realized that they seemed to have overlooked a very important point. Qinyu was not a true sage. In other words, if they joined hands to summon the Sea of Misery, they might be able to pose a threat to the yard master, but they would not be able to intimidate Qinyu, and he had already proven his strength through the previous slaughter. Facing Qinyu, who wasn't suppressed by the bitter sea, if a fierce battle were to erupt, then they would surely suffer heavy casualties. Obviously, in order to prevent the yard master from being suppressed, Qinyu would definitely take the initiative to attack the semi-sage who summoned the bitter sea. Thus, when Qinyu said he would use the true saint Great Tao as compensation, the truth could also be seen as a warning to them. It could be roughly translated as, "Peach Garden is very sincere, and it's about time to stop while you're ahead. Otherwise, you won't have a good time either." This sentence seemed soft, but was actually hard. There was definitely a price to pay for killing a saint. The yard master's peach blossoms were incomparably terrifying, but they couldn't simply bloom and swallow people. She must have paid a huge price for it. If she joined forces with the 2 true saints, the possibility of destroying the peach garden would be higher. However, before the peach garden was destroyed, more than half of them would die. No one knew if they would be the ones to die. Moreover, once they suffered heavy casualties and were unable to maintain the Sea of Bitterness, even if the remaining people survived, they wouldn't be able to interfere in the division of benefits. Although the Netherworld Saint's great Tao fragment couldn't compare to what he had obtained from the peach garden, there was no doubt that it was still precious. So, did he still need to consider more? Mr. Ninth of the Peach Garden was very cunning. Of course, the roaring thunder in the sky did not descend for a long time, which was also an important weight that overpowered the decision of the saints. The sages took a deep breath and exhaled. All right. Bang, bang. Waves of power erupted, condensing into a giant hand that grabbed at the blood, jade-like, great path fragment. In the darkness, the 1,000 Nether Saints' face was ashen. As the saying went, "Go for wool and come home shorn." This was probably what he had encountered today. The Netherworld had died, and all the saints had withdrawn. Only he and the Scholatry Saint of West Mountain were left, and it was already very difficult for them to do anything else. Moreover, after so many years, the Yard Master had once again summoned the peach blossoms to swallow the saint. If he could do it once, who could guarantee that he couldn't do it a second time if he risked his life? The darkness whizzed into the distance, and the aura that belonged to the 1,000 Nether Saint quickly disappeared. Sage Scholatry coughed lightly. He didn't look any better than the yard mistress. At this moment, there was a sinister look in his eyes. He looked deeply at Chinyu, turned around to her open space, and left with a single step. At this point, the battle to slay the sage had come to an end. Chinyu cupped his hands together. "Honorable master, should we leave?" The yard master glanced at him and lifted her hand to point in front of her. Amidst the vibrations in the space, a large door made of interwoven peach would emerge from within. Whoosh! With the sound of breaking air, second senior apprentice brother arrived with eldest senior apprentice brother and seventh senior apprentice sister. They bowed. "Greetings, master." The yard master stepped through the door first. "Let's go." Eldest senior apprentice brother, second senior apprentice brother, seventh senior apprentice sister, please. Chinyu cupped his hands together and said. Seventh senior apprentice, sister, turned her head and glanced at the sages who were fighting over the great Tao fragments. A trace of unwillingness flashed in her eyes. It was the peach garden who had slain a sage, but they had to give up more than half of the gains. It had to be known that these were great Tao fragments of a true sage. Every piece was enough to make a half-sage and below cultivator go crazy. Eldest senior apprentice, brother coughed lightly. 1,000 faces, let's go. Seventh senior apprentice, sister licked the corner of her mouth and glanced at Chinyu. Okay. She supported eldest senior apprentice, brother, through the door. Second senior apprentice, brother, cupped his hands together. Thank you for today, little junior brother. He opened his mouth to speak, but hesitated. He shook his head and said, little junior brother's performance today really scared me. He patted Chinyu's shoulder and stepped into the Peachwood portal. Was second senior apprentice brother reminding him? It seemed that he had to think of an excuse when he returned to the peach garden. It was best if he could keep the matter of the primordial spirit a secret. Suppressing these thoughts for the time being, Chinyu turned and swept his eyes around. Countless eyes were looking at him, filled with awe and fear. However, these people were worrying too much. Chinyu had already obtained the largest great Tao fragment. Even if he didn't have it, he still wouldn't have done anything. Chinyu certainly understood the principle of going too far was as bad as not going far enough. He had already obtained the benefits of the Lost Garden, so he had to compensate them in order to change the minds of the sages. If he was truly greedy and wanted to take all the benefits in his hands, then he would also have to force everyone into opposing positions. The gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Chinyu vaguely glanced at the location of the Lost Garden. Then he turned and left, his figure vanishing into the portal. Seeing this, everyone let out long breaths of relief. St. Thousand Nether and West Mountain Scholar Sage had already left. If the Peach Garden tore up their agreement, they clearly didn't have much strength to resist. But now, it seemed that the Peach Garden had no intention of going back on their word. This fragment is mine. Scram! Once it falls into my hands, it belongs to me. If you continue to pester me, then don't worry about me being impolite. Rumble, rumble. The sea of bitterness shattered and dissipated. The struggle for the Netherworld Saint's great Tao fragment became even more intense. In another direction, Half-Sage Dragon Mountain stuck close to the ground. He hid his aura as much as possible and raised his speed to the fastest. The moment Chinyu left, he turned and fled without hesitation. He was already a great distance away from the battlefield. But Half-Sage Dragon Mountain's luck was good. A great Tao fragment just happened to fly in front of him. Before the other sages could fight for it, it was already in his bag. He could no longer return to the Dragon Mountain, Holy Land. He was well aware that the reason he was still alive was because he had also summoned one of the Bitter Sea half-sages. Qin Yi didn't want to complicate matters, so he didn't continue to attack him. But the enmity between them had already been sown. As the saying goes, if you don't kill a tiger, you will be harmed, much less the incomparably terrifying Peach Garden. Now, the best choice left for him was to flee as far as he could. Before he could find a sufficiently powerful backer, he could only change his appearance and hide from the world. But he still had a chance. That was the great Tao fragment in his hand that came from the Netherworld Saint. With this, he might be able to spy on the other shore and transcend the sea of bitterness in a single go, becoming a true saint. At that time, as long as he was willing to submit to a ruler, he would naturally be able to sit back and relax. He would no longer need to fear the threat of the Peach Garden. Well, that was it. After leaving this place, he would find a safe place to go into seclusion. If he didn't make a breakthrough, he would never come back. As soon as this thought came to mind, Half-Sage Dragon Mountain's eyes widened. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to roar, but found that he couldn't make any sound. His whole body stiffened, and the fear in his eyes became more and more intense. This was because at this moment a figure had emerged from the shadow under Half-Sage Dragon Mountain's feet. The former head disciple of the Western Mountain, who had an illustrious reputation, walked out. Now he was expressionless, and his eyes were pitch black, as if they were connected to an endless abyss. Or perhaps the shadow of the abyss was reflected in his eyes. He stretched out his hand, and under Half-Sage Dragon Mountain's fearful eyes, 9 heads grabbed his neck and bent his fingers. With a light, snapping sound, as his neck was twisted, all the vitality in Half-Sage Dragon Mountain's body also disappeared. In the next moment, his entire body was submerged in darkness. The darkness tumbled and wriggled. After several breaths of time, it returned to 9 heads' body. Half-Sage Dragon Mountain had completely disappeared, as if he had been dissolved by the darkness and had become a part of 9 heads' body. His eyes flickered, and the pitch-black night became even darker. 9 heads turned his head to look at the place where the saints were fighting and revealed a trace of hesitation. At this moment, he suddenly frowned. He took a step forward, and his entire body disappeared like a phantom. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Angry thunder finally poured down from the heavens. The saints who were fighting for the great Tao fragment with all their strength were suddenly startled. They all looked up at the place where the thunder roared and crashed down, confusion in their eyes. The Yard Master had already left. The Heavenly Punishment's reaction speed was a bit too slow. Moreover, the Heavenly Punishment's accuracy wasn't just a little bit off. Chapter 1304. Peach Garden. Qin Yu stepped out of the portal and suddenly frowned. He turned his head and looked back. His deep eyes seemed to fall into the distance. Just now, he found that his connection with the shadow of the abyss had suddenly become very vague, as if it had been covered by something. The shadow of the abyss still existed, but he could no longer clearly perceive its position and state. Was it because of the distance between them? It was possible, but Qin Yu's intuition told him that things were not so simple. Sensing the gaze on him, Qin Yu suppressed his thoughts and stepped forward, cupping his hands in salute. Master. Although everyone had returned to the Peach Garden through the same portal, only the Yard Master and Qin Yu were here. Eldest senior brother, second senior brother, and 7th senior sister were not here. Qin Yu's mind raced. He guessed that the Yard Master must have something to say. As for what it was not difficult to guess. This made Qin Yu a little hesitant. What should he say, and how much should he say? Of course, it was only hesitation. He was not nervous or uneasy. In all fairness, although he recognized the people of the peach garden and had a good impression of them, the relationship between him and the yardmaster was more of cooperation. It was not that he should be arrogant, because he was proud. It was only today that Qin Yu truly stood on an equal footing with the yardmaster. The yardmaster was about to say something, but her expression changed slightly. There was a hint of surprise in her eyes. She immediately coughed and spat out a mouthful of blood. "Master!" The yardmaster's face was pale. She waved her hand and said, "It's okay." The heavenly punishment had been stabilized. I don't know why it suddenly fell, but it seems that something has taken away a part of it. It can be said that it has taken the punishment for me. She looked at Qin Yu and continued, "In comparison, Qin Yu, you have given me a big surprise." Qin Yu cupped his hands in salute. "I have to thank Master for giving me the opportunity to enter the lost garden." The truth was right in front of him, but he did not try to explain. The yardmaster's eyes flashed, revealing a glimmer of light. "I admit that I think highly of you. Otherwise, I would not have included you in the 4.5 people team. But I have to admit that your performance is still far beyond my imagination. I let you enter the lost garden with the intention of finding 1 or 2 sources of life to forge your body more powerful. But now the Galaxy Divine Seal, the legendary realm of the true God path cultivation, has been achieved by you just like that." Qin Yu was silent for several breaths of time. He flipped his palm and light surged. This was a pure halo of light, pure white without any impurities at all. But as one looked at it, it was like they could see traces of all things in the world. It gave off an incomparably mystical feeling. The yardmaster's eyes narrowed slightly. Qin Yu said, "Honorable Master, please absorb this. It can help you quickly recover from your injuries." After pausing for a moment, he continued, "Only by quickly recovering to your peak will you be able to completely quell the storm stirred up by the lost garden." The yardmaster muttered to herself for a moment, then reached out and clenched her fist. The ball of light whizzed out and merged into her body the moment it touched her palm. He closed his eyes and opened them a moment later. A sharp light surged within them. He stared at Qin Yu, a look of shock on his face. Qin Yu nodded. "That's right. Everything is just as Master thought." However, he sighed in his heart. As expected, the yard mistress had already sensed it. The yard master took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. "Pre-celestial spirit. It's actually a pre-celestial spirit." She glanced at Qin Yu. "Many years ago, we suspected that there was a powerful source of strength in the lost garden. It was because of its existence that the ancient life forms were able to forcefully preserve their last breath. We had many speculations about this, but even now, I still find it hard to believe. A pre-celestial spirit is born along with the world. It can be regarded as a part of the world's pre-celestial spirit. How did the ancient life forms achieve this? If they were so powerful that they could kill a part of the world, how did they end up in such a state?" Astonishment, puzzlement, and disbelief. Qin Yu didn't sense any covetousness or greed from the yardmaster. This made him relax a little, and he subconsciously let out a breath. Then he sensed the yardmaster looking at him with a faint smile on her face. Qin Yu awkwardly coughed and cupped his hands together. This disciple is indeed a little worried. "I've made a fool of myself in front of Honorable Master. Please punish me." The yardmaster said, "Your performance will only make me feel more at ease. This means that even though your strength has skyrocketed, you still have your original intentions. You haven't forgotten Peach." Qin Yu wanted to remind her that the yardmaster's description was inaccurate. He was only worried about his own woman. However, Ningling, Yu Qi, and Peach were originally a whole, so it wasn't wrong to say that. However, since you are worried, why did you take out the power of the pre-celestial spirit? Moreover, with your current strength, I no longer have the qualifications to punish you as I please. Qin Yu pretended not to hear the last sentence. He already had an answer to the first question. He said, "First, I've already said it before. Honorable Master, you need to recover as soon as possible so that you can intimidate everyone and calm things down as soon as possible. Second, I'm not confident that I can hide it from you. Rather than creating a rift between us, I might as well tell you on my own initiative." The yard master glanced at him. "And third, you must be sure that even if you tell me if I have any ill intentions, you can still protect yourself." Qin Yu smiled bitterly. He didn't say anything, but in fact he had already given his answer. The yard master didn't dwell on this. She said in a deep voice, "Qin Yu, don't tell anyone else about the pre-celestial spirit. Otherwise there will be great trouble." "Yes, disciple will remember." After speaking, Qin Yu hesitated for a moment and said, "Eldest senior brother and seventh senior sister have helped me a lot, especially eldest senior brother. He fought for time for me in the Lost Garden and suffered serious injuries." The yard master stretched out her hand. "Give me some of your power. I'll change my explanation to them." Qin Yu took out 2 large clumps. "I'll have to trouble Honorable Master." The corner of the yard master's mouth twitched. She suddenly said, "Qin Yu, do you still have a lot of the power in your body?" Qin Yu blinked. "Don't worry. I haven't fallen to the point of plundering my disciples' treasures, but I can trade with you." The yard master suddenly felt a headache coming on. Qin Yu had already condensed his body of rules and cultivated the Galaxy Divine Seal. He didn't seem to lack anything. Weapons. Yes, this boy didn't have a single treasure that he could use to fight with others. He had to rely on his powerful body or sweep up a galaxy to smash others. As a disciple of the Peach Garden, this was too reckless. Moreover, it didn't suit his current status at all. However, ordinary goods definitely wouldn't do. The yard master couldn't afford to lose face because of what she had just said. She waved her hand and said, "Let's drop this matter for now. When I get something suitable, I'll trade with you. But Qin Yu, remember, the power of the pre-celestial spirit is incomparably precious. You must cherish it and not waste it casually. I'll accept the clump of energy you gave to your eldest senior brother. The 1,000-faced assassin's injuries aren't serious, so don't waste it." The yard master suddenly stopped. Qin Yu said, "Honorable Master?" The yard master waved her hand. "It's fine. Since you've already taken it out, I'll give it to her." She looked at Qin Yu and said in a deep voice, "Remember what you said before. Don't say anything about the pre-celestial spirit." Qin Yu said, "Yes, Honorable Master." He turned his hand and took out 10 clumps of the power of the pre-celestial spirit. "Honorable Master, is this enough for you?" The yard master stared at him. "How much do you have?" This question wasn't easy to answer. Qin Yu couldn't possibly say that he had a lot more, as many as a mountain. Seeing that Qin Yu lowered his head and didn't speak, the yard master humphed and waved her hand to put away the 10 clumps of the power of the pre-celestial spirit. "I'll give you what you want to trade as soon as possible." She paused and added, "I won't let you suffer any losses." Qin Yu nodded repeatedly, indicating that he had complete confidence in the yard master's character. Seeing that the yard master didn't want to say anything more, he bowed and left. The Peach Garden didn't seem to know about the saint-slaying battle that had taken place outside the Lost Garden. After Qin Yu returned to his residence, it was incomparably quiet for several days until Lei Xiaoyu came knocking on his door with the Azure Dragon. "Big Brother Qin." Lei Xiaoyu called out. She opened her mouth and unexpectedly got a little stuck. Her expression was a little unnatural. It seemed that the Peach Garden wasn't real. They were completely cut off from the outside world. Qin Yu rubbed her head. "What's wrong? I haven't seen you for a while, and you already feel like I'm a stranger?" Perhaps it was because of Qin Yu's smile, but Lei Xiaoyu instantly relaxed. She blushed and said, "I was just afraid that you would blame me. Back then, Seventh senior apprentice, sister scared me and said that it was honorable master's orders. She told me not to reveal that seventh senior apprentice, sister, had changed into my appearance. If you want to blame someone, blame honorable master. I absolutely didn't do it on purpose. Qin Yu's complexion changed. He cupped his hands together and bowed. Greetings, honorable master. Lei Xiaoyu's entire body stiffened. She turned around in a fluster. It's not like that. Honorable master, listen to me. She stopped abruptly. There was no one behind her, not even a shadow. There was a burst of laughter from the side. Lei Xiaoyu pouted and angrily shouted, Big brother Qin, you've gone too far. Because of the disparity in their cultivation, the feeling of alienation had finally disappeared. Qin Yu reached out a hand and grabbed her small and sparkling ear. Since you know you were wrong, then hurry up and come in and flatter me. I've spoken so much to you that my mouth is already dry. Then he discovered that the azure dragon was hiding behind Lei Xiaoyu. It had shrunk down to the size of a finger joint, its eyes flashing and evasive. Lei Xiaoyu cried out in pain as she said, Big brother Qin, the azure dragon knows he was wrong. He came to apologize to you this time. As she spoke, she pulled him down and placed him in front of Qin Yu. Azure dragon, hurry up and apologize to big brother Qin. The azure dragon was about to cry, Fine. Although that was indeed what happened, now that you mention it, I feel like I've lost face. The azure dragon clenched its teeth and stood up. Mr. Ninth, the azure dragon was reckless and ignorant before. I ask for your forgiveness if I have offended you. He had no choice but to admit defeat. He, in front of the Lost Garden, although he had been summoned back by seventh senior apprentice sister after being severely wounded, he had still witnessed everything that had happened afterwards. The Netherworld Saint and the 1,000 Nether Saint had joined forces, yet Qin Yu had still been able to face them head-on. Others did not know that Qin Yu had used the laws of light and darkness to offset the 1,000 Nether Saints' power, and he had also extravagantly burned the power of his connate spirit in exchange for great power. Therefore, in the azure dragon's eyes, Qin Yu was now a super fierce person who could face two true saints head-on and even gain the upper hand. Moreover, in the end, he had joined forces with the Yard Master to kill the Netherworld Saint. The azure dragon would have to be stupid to oppose such a Qin Yu. That would be asking for trouble. The corners of Qin Yu's lips curled up. He said, There's no need to apologize. Just remember who brought you to the peach garden in the future. There was a hint of warning in his words. Lei Xiaoyu wrinkled her nose and said unhappily, Big brother Qin, don't worry. The azure dragon is my best friend. He will protect me forever. Besides, don't I have you, big brother Qin? As long as you are here, I feel that no one in this world can bully me. When the azure dragon heard the first half of Qin Yu's words, he felt very touched. But why did he suddenly change his attitude towards the latter half? Although this was the truth, how was he supposed to live like this in the future? It had to be known that the azure dragon's goal had always been to protect Lei Xiaoyu well after he became strong enough, so that he wouldn't suffer any grievances. But now, the azure dragon suddenly felt that his goal had completely collapsed. Qin Yu glared at her. You talk too much. Hurry up and make some tea for me. In the end, he couldn't drink the tea that Lei Xiaoyu made. There was a knock on the door again. This time, it was the eldest senior brother. Lei Xiaoyu ran to open the door and bowed. Greetings, eldest senior brother. Xiaoyu, you're here too. The eldest senior brother smiled. I have some matters to discuss with little junior brother. Is he free? Qin Yu had already walked out when he heard the conversation. He cupped his hands together and said, Greetings, eldest senior brother. The eldest senior brother nodded. Little junior brother. Then there was nothing else. Qin Yu looked at the eldest senior brother, who was trying his best to smile, but had a slightly unnatural expression on his face. Qin Yu could roughly guess what had happened. Xiaoyu, I remember you saying last time that you had some good tea leaves on hand. Go and get them now. I have to entertain eldest senior brother. Lei Xiaoyu was a clever girl. She immediately said, "All right, I will go now. Eldest senior brother, you two chat first." She led the azure dragon out, not forgetting to close the courtyard doors. The eldest senior brother smiled at Qin Yu, revealing a bit of gratitude. He took a deep breath and was about to speak when Qin Yu beat him to it. "Eldest senior brother, did you come for 7th senior apprentice sister?" "Yes." "Then I understand." Qin Yu lifted his hand. 5 balls of light appeared in his palm. "Eldest senior brother, is this enough?" The eldest senior brother thought for a moment. "It's probably not enough." This was a bit awkward. Qin Yu rubbed his nose. Just what was wrong with 7th senior apprentice sister? Even this wasn't enough. It had to be known that when he gave the yard master 10 balls of light, he had been shocked on the spot. Schwa, schwa, schwa. He took out 5 more. "Eldest senior brother, don't worry. I have more if this isn't enough." The eldest senior brother rubbed his hands together, his face flushing red. He cupped his hands together and deeply bowed. "Thank you, youngest junior brother." Qin Yu jumped in fright. He turned to avoid him. "Eldest senior apprentice brother, what are you doing?" The eldest senior brother said, "Honorable master has already warned me, but I really couldn't bear to see 7th senior apprentice sister continue to suffer, so I had no choice but to shamelessly ask for her help. In a moment, I will return to honorable master and ask for punishment. Also, youngest junior brother, I swear that even if I die, I will not say a single word to anyone." Qin Yu said, "If I didn't believe eldest senior apprentice brother, I wouldn't have given it to you. Moreover, I must thank you and 7th senior apprentice sister for helping me in the lost garden. Since this matter involves 7th senior apprentice sister, eldest senior apprentice brother should hurry. I won't keep you here to drink tea." The eldest senior brother thanked him once more. He took the balls of light and hurried away. He was finally able to drink tea. Not to mention the tea leaves that Lei Xiaoyu had brought, the taste was quite good. She had a gossipy expression. She whispered, "What is eldest senior apprentice brother doing here?" Just as she finished speaking, she was hit in the head. "You're just a little kid. What are you blindly asking about? The tea is getting cold. Hurry up and add some more water." Lei Xiaoyu pouted as she was ordered around. Qin Yu sipped his tea in satisfaction. His gaze suddenly fell in a certain direction, and a look of admiration appeared on his face. The yard master was indeed the yard master. She had almost recovered so quickly. Now it was time for him to leave. Chapter 1305. Sword light cut through the skies, cutting through the clouds and forming a sharp and straight line. Several young cultivators on the ground looked up, envy on their faces. In this world they lived in, not only was there a massive sea, but there were also many powerful monster beasts. Only powerful cultivators dared to fly in the skies. It was unknown how long it would be before they would have the qualifications to fly freely in the skies. But what they didn't know was that the sword cultivators they were so envious of had ugly complexions. One of the young juniors was pale, and there was fear in his eyes that couldn't be concealed. In particular, the deep blue color that was unique to the sea had appeared in front of them. At the front of the group, a black-robed old man seemed to sense something. He frowned and said, "Sanyang, if you do something wrong, you must bear the consequences. My Heavenly Sword sect has never had anyone that doesn't dare to take responsibility for their actions." Sanyang explained in a low voice. It was her pet that ran out to hurt people. Moreover, I didn't know about it before, and I even let it go. Shut up! The black-robed old man roared. He frowned and swept his eyes over the people around him. "I know that you are all dissatisfied with this. That's right. Strictly speaking, Sanyang didn't do anything wrong. But these are the rules of the vast sun world. Although my Heavenly Sword sect is strong, we do not have a true Permitha saint to protect our destiny. As for the master of this place, she is the beloved daughter of a true Prometheus saint. We cannot afford to provoke her. If you are weaker than others, then you must bow your head and admit defeat. Although this goes against the sword intent of my heavenly sword sect, rules are rules. If you abide by them and live, then everything will be possible in the future. Otherwise, if we stubbornly hold our heads high and adopt a tyrannical attitude, the heavenly sword sect would have been destroyed countless times over. With a deep breath, the black-robed old man's voice became even lower, filled with endless repression. If you are unwilling, if you are angry, then remember this feeling today and use it to urge yourself to cultivate even harder. One day, when a true saint is born in my heavenly sword sect, we will no longer need to bow and scrape to others. We will be able to straighten our backs and reason with others. Pa, pa, applause rang out. The surface of the sea suddenly bulged and split open. A giant turtle emerged, surrounded by a group of prawn soldiers and crab generals. The dragoness clapped her hands with an unfriendly expression. The cultivators of the heavenly sword sect are indeed skilled. They can even use this kind of thing to educate their disciples. But why does it sound like you are compromising and only waiting to settle the score? The black sword-robed elder's complexion changed. He had never imagined that he would meet today's main character on the surface of the sea, and that his words had been heard. But he was an experienced and prudent man. After a moment of panic, he steadied himself and cupped his hands in greeting. Heavenly sword sex, black sword wielding, Ark greets, Your Highness, the Dragon Lady. My words were inappropriate when I was teaching my disciple. If I have offended Your Highness, please forgive me. The dragoness glanced at him. Black-robed sword wielder? In other words, you were personally conferred the title by His Excellency, Sword Saint. Is this a warning to me? The black sword-robed elder cupped his hands together. Ark does not have such intentions. I only mentioned my status to show my respect to Your Highness. The reason I came here today is because my disciple, Sun Yang, accidentally injured Your Highness' beloved pet. We came to your station to offer our humble apologies. He turned and shouted, You bastard, Her Highness the Dragon Lady is right in front of you. Hurry up and apologize. I ask Your Highness to be magnanimous and show mercy. He sincerely apologized and didn't try to argue back, but at the same time he jokingly glossed over the matter. Although this black-robed sword-wielder seemed cold and honest, his thoughts were actually quite clever. In the past, out of respect for His Excellency Sword Saint and with the black-robed sword-wielder personally leading people here to apologize, perhaps the dragoness would have let this matter go. But these past days she was in a bad mood. As she looked at Sun Yang, who was bowing and apologizing, her lips curved up. Is this the heavenly sword sect's humble apologies? Well said, but it doesn't seem like much. Show your sincerity. The black-robed sword-wielder coldly shouted, Kneel! Sun Yang clenched his teeth, his face flushing red. But under the stern eyes of his teacher, he had no choice but to slowly lower his head. It's just a small matter. Just let it go. Why do you have to be so overbearing? The black-robed sword-wielder's expression changed. This voice had come from behind him. Could it be that someone from the sword sect had spoken? This was a big problem. Suddenly turning around, the black-robed sword-wielder was stunned. The person who had spoken was indeed behind him, and had made no attempt to conceal himself. But he was not a cultivator from the heavenly sword sect. He heaved a sigh of relief, but in the next moment he tensed up. His forehead was instantly covered with beads of sweat, his eyes filled with awe. If this person had not spoken, he would not have been able to detect him. Just this ability to conceal himself was enough to send a chill down his spine. Fortunately, this seemingly young cultivator had no ill intentions towards the heavenly sword sect. Otherwise, they would not even know how they had died. The more he thought about it, the more awe he felt. The black-robed sword-wielder bowed, respectfully. Heavenly Sword Sex Feng Zhou greets, Your Highness. The reason he had described him as seemingly young was because, in the vast Yang world, there were many seniors who liked to act young. If one were to judge one's attitude purely based on one's appearance, the result would be very touching. And now, in the eyes of the Sword Sex Feng Zhou, this young man in front of him was likely in existence who was acting young. Otherwise, this person would not have spoken to the dragon girl in such a casual and commanding tone. The black-robed sword wielder was considered a character in the Heavenly Sword sect, but he could not compare to the dragon girl at all. He did not recognize this person, but with the dragon girl's status, she would definitely know. He was overjoyed and then grateful. After all, with such a great figure asking, today's matter would surely be resolved. After all, there was no enmity between the two sides that could not be resolved. The dragon girl frowned. Who are you? The black-robed sword wielder was stunned. The script was different from what he had imagined. Since the dragon girl did not recognize this person, his hands trembled and beads of sweat began to cover his forehead. Dragon girl, do you not recognize me? Across from him, the young cultivator's lips curled up. This face was unfamiliar, but this smile the dragon girl stiffened. A face that she had seen countless times appeared in her mind. It was him. Feeling the faint, teasing smile in his eyes, the dragon girl was certain. Her first thought was that she was done for. This fellow had come to seek revenge. But soon, she steadied her mind and tried to restore her thoughts. If he really came to seek revenge, there was no need for him to go through so much trouble. Moreover, he had changed his face to something she had never seen before. As long as he wasn't seeking revenge, her heart relaxed. The dragon girl squeezed out a smile and respectfully bowed. Dragon girl greets, Mister. I didn't realize it was you before. I hope Mister won't take offense. The solemn netherworld saint had been killed by this fellow and the yard master. It was said that in that battle he had faced two true saints alone and hadn't fallen into a disadvantageous position. In fact, he had even held the advantage. If it weren't for the fact that she had confirmed this many times and that the information she had obtained from different sources was the same, the dragon girl would never have believed it. But this was the horrifying truth. Respect, she had to be respectful. I cannot give him the slightest chance to find fault with me. Otherwise, the dragon girl would truly be afraid. Even if my father appeared, he might not be able to protect her. Qin Yu smiled. He had already experienced the dragon girl's personality of changing according to the wind. He had experienced it once, but now he discovered that she could use it even more skillfully. He turned and waved his hand at the people of the Heavenly Sword sect. I have something to discuss with the dragon girl. You can all leave first. The black-robed man's heart shook. His tone became even more respectful. He bowed and said, If I may ask your name, I hope you can let us know which senior is helping us today. Qin Yu raised an eyebrow. Forget about my name. I am Heavenly Sword Sex Ling Xiao. I have some friendship with him. You may all leave. Yes, we juniors will take our leave. The black-robed man turned and led his people away. Sword light cut through the skies, and they were soon far away. Sun Yang looked back, his face full of shock and longing. Sword wielder, this, sir. Before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted. The black-robed old man glared at him and said, Silence! He subconsciously looked around and didn't notice anything wrong. Only then did he relax and say, Since you don't want us to know your identity, don't tell anyone after we return. Do you understand? Yes, sword wielder. The people of the Heavenly Sword sect respectfully acknowledged. Sun Yang licked his lips. Don't worry, sword wielder. We know the severity of this matter. It is just that this sir's cultivation. Everyone's eyes brightened. The black-robed old man glanced at them and pointed a finger to the skies. For the dragon girl to be so respectful and careful, he can only be in existence on the same level as the dragon sage. Permitha, true saint. On the other side, after the Heavenly Sword sect people left. Qin Yu's eyes fell on the dragon girl. Where are you planning on going? The dragon girl wanted to make up some random excuse, but for some unknown reason, she couldn't speak as Qin Yu's eyes locked onto her. She could only bitterly smile and say, reporting to Mr. I am preparing to go to the East Sea to pay my respects to my royal father. She couldn't possibly say she was preparing to take refuge in the East Sea, right? Qin Yu snapped his fingers. Very good. I am also preparing to see Lord Dragon Sage. Let's go together. His eyes swept around. The crowd of shrimp soldiers and crab generals froze in place. Under his gaze, they felt their bodies turn to wood. You all come with me. Sure enough, Qin Yu had a purpose for coming here this time. He didn't want anyone to know his whereabouts. In other words, he really wasn't here to seek revenge. The dragon girl heaved a sigh of relief. She hurriedly said, It is my honor to travel with Mr. I believe that my father will definitely welcome Mr.'s arrival. As for what Qin Yu wanted to do and whether the dragon sage would really welcome him, she couldn't care less. Qin Yu's figure moved and he landed directly on the large turtle's back. His aura instantly vanished. The dragon girl's face stiffened. She discovered that if she didn't turn her head, she wouldn't be able to sense Qin Yu's presence at all. With his strength and the ability to restrain his aura, it would be too easy for him to kill someone. She couldn't afford to offend him. The large turtle's senses were sharp. Qin Yu, who was standing on its back, had long been scared silly. He only recovered after being kicked by the dragon girl. He stumbled all the way to the East Sea. Today in the East Sea Dragon Palace there was a joke. It was said that the dragon girl's mount, the large turtle, had too much fun at home a few days ago. Its limbs went limp and weak. When it carried the dragon girl into the dragon palace, it actually fell to the ground. Its limbs twitched on the spot and it started foaming at the mouth. It was taken away for emergency treatment. It was suspected to be suffering from tortoise wind. The pitiful and diligent large turtle had been scared by Qin Yu the whole way. It could be said that it had a strong will to endure until it reached the dragon palace. Yet it inexplicably bore the name of Tortoise Wind. It was really sad and lamentable. Chapter 1306. Lord Dragon Sage was losing his temper again, which happened quite frequently recently. Every time he would stomp his feet and curse loudly, throwing out all kinds of things. The servants of Dragon Palace didn't dare to come close, so they could only vaguely hear some things from a distance, such as, I hate two sages. I saw the good material first. The old peach thief stole my son-in-law. I, East Sea Dragon Sage, am not satisfied, and so on. The elders of Dragon Palace who had served Lord Dragon Sage for many years guessed the reason for his anger. They could only drive the servants further away with a wry smile to avoid damaging Lord Dragon Sage's reputation. But the elders of Dragon Palace didn't approve of Lord Dragon Sage's current attitude from the bottom of their hearts. Lord Dragon Sage was originally from the Peach Garden. He couldn't just belong to East Sea just because he liked him. It also depended on whether he and the yard master were willing. What's more, Lord Dragon Sage probably couldn't beat the yard master in a fight. His experience of being beaten up in the early years had proved this. Now he could only hide in the study and vent his anger, which was really beneath his status. Dragon Girl heard her father's roar from afar. At first, she didn't hear it clearly, but after a few words, her expression became strange. She was a little ashamed and annoyed, and couldn't help but look at Qin Yu subconsciously. Fortunately, his expression was calm, and his breathing didn't change. It seemed that he didn't care about it, which made her feel a little relieved. Father was too shameful. Should she still go there? But today's situation was obviously not up to her. Seeing that Qin Yu didn't intend to stop, she had to continue leading the way. Ordinary servants of Dragon Palace certainly didn't dare to stop her, until an old man with a turtle shell on his back stood in front of her and said, Your Highness, why are you here today? In front of her was a turtle spirit who had lived for many years. It was said that when Lord Dragon Sage was young, he was responsible for taking care of him. Now he had a high status in Dragon Palace with the title of Chief Steward. But now he was old and didn't take care of trivial matters. In Dragon Sage's birthday celebration, he only asked some juniors to take care of it and didn't personally intervene. So seeing this turtle spirit today, Dragon Girl was surprised and respectfully saluted. "Grandpa Turtle, why are you here?" The turtle spirit glanced at Chinyu and smiled. "Lord Dragon Sage's body isn't feeling well, so I will personally stand guard here in case something happens. May I ask who this little friend is?" Cough. The dragoness coughed and hurriedly said, "Grandpa Turtle, Mr. is my father's honored guest. He has important matters to attend to today." The tortoise spirit's expression changed slightly. Although the dragoness was a bit mischievous, she always had a sense of propriety and knew the big picture. Of course, he understood the reminder in her words. "Lord Dragon Sage's esteemed guest, doesn't that mean?" Taking a deep breath, the tortoise spirit bowed respectfully. "I didn't know Mr. Zhang Xian's identity, and I didn't mean to offend you. I beseech Mr. Zhang Xian to pardon me." Qin, you waved his hand. "It's fine." He lifted a finger and pointed forward. "I'll have to trouble you to report this. I'll wait here." Ahem. To be honest, he was a little embarrassed to listen to the words in the Dragon Sage's roar, especially when the other party involved was right beside him. The tortoise spirit left in a hurry. The roars and curses suddenly stopped, and the tortoise spirit trotted back. "Esteemed guest, Lord Dragon Sage invites you over." The dragoness coughed. "Mister, since you have important matters to discuss with my father, I won't disturb you any longer." Chinyu nodded. "That's fine. I'll go myself." The tortoise spirit looked over. The dragoness hesitated for a moment and then said, "Grandpa Turtle, this person has hidden his identity, so there must be a reason for this. He is the Peach Garden's Mr. Ninth, so it's fine as long as you understand." The tortoise spirit's eyes widened. He took a deep breath and nodded. As he looked at Chinyu's back, he subconsciously revealed a look of awe. In the current vast young world, the one with the greatest limelight was this person. After all, it had been a long, long time since someone had slaughtered a true saint. Moreover, Chinyu's rise had been far too astonishing, so fast that no one could respond. He had all sorts of mysterious auras about him and was a hot topic of conversation. Naturally, he attracted even more attention. Chinyu pushed open the door and entered the study. Besides being empty, there wasn't the slightest bit of a mess. He had cleaned up quite quickly. The dragon sage sat in the throne, his complexion grim. His eyes locked onto Chinyu, and he immediately frowned. "Just who are you? Since you've come to the Dragon Palace, why are you hiding yourself?" His tone was calm and steady, but deep in his heart he was shaking. He could feel his head throbbing. What nonsense! This person had already arrived in front of him, and the solemn Eastern Sea Dragon Sage still hadn't been able to see through his identity. No, it was more accurate to say that he hadn't even been able to capture this person's aura. This was far too frightening. Just think about it. An unfathomably deep cultivator had already broken into your lair, and yet you couldn't sense him at all. Just thinking about what was hidden here made one's scalp tingle. In truth, this was the first time the Dragon Sage had encountered such a situation. Chinyu could sense that beneath the Dragon Sage's calm exterior, there was a bit of nervousness in his eyes. He suddenly felt a great sense of accomplishment. At the longevity feast, when the Dragon Sage had watched him fight with Smelt One, it was likely that he only had the mentality of watching two juniors fight. Even if he had killed Smelt One who had stepped into the bitter sea, the most he would have done was make the Dragon Sage feel that he was a promising junior. But now, Chinyu was able to make the Dragon Sage feel restless and even a bit of fear. It was hard to explain the changes in mood brought about by this change in status. Chinyu's lips curved up in a smile. He cupped his hands together and said, "Peach Garden Disciple 9th Chinyu greets, Lord Dragon Sage." As he spoke, his entire appearance changed, and he returned to his original appearance. "Qin Yu!" The dragon sage roared out loud, nearly jumping up from where he stood. He gripped the armrests of his chair and stubbornly stared at Qin Yu, trying to find something. But what a pity! Even though he watched helplessly as Qin Yu appeared in front of him, he still wasn't able to capture any fluctuations. How did he do this? And more importantly, with Qin Yu's current strength, in addition to the move he revealed today, perhaps it was because the hearts of father and daughter were connected. But the dragon sage immediately felt his scalp tingle, just like the dragon girl. If he were to be targeted by such a Qin Yu, just thinking about it made his heart go cold. The dragon sage took a deep breath and tried to compose himself. He smiled and said, "So it was Mr. Ninth who arrived. This saint has failed to welcome you from afar. I hope Mr. Ninth won't take offense. Please sit." Disregarding everything else, just the ability of these old fellows to control their emotions and the thickness of their skin was truly admirable. After all, as long as one wasn't a fool, they would know that with his cultivation, he would have heard the dragon sage's roars just now. Qin Yu smiled and sat down. "Thank you, Lord Dragon Sage." Before he could get straight to the point, the dragon sage suddenly said, "Mr. Ninth, I wonder if you are willing to take in a concubine? My family's dragon girl is as beautiful as a flower. Although she is a bit naughty and mischievous, she admires Mr. Ninth greatly. As long as Mr. Ninth agrees, we can enter the bridal chamber in the Dragon Palace today." Qin Yu nearly choked on his own saliva. His eyes widened. He never thought that the dignified dragon sage of the East Sea would say such shameless words. But he soon reacted. The dragon sage was likely doing this on purpose. Even if he had such intentions, he wouldn't have mentioned it in such a manner. It was likely that the dragon sage wanted to ease his previous gaffe and also throw Qin Yu's mind into chaos, so that both sides would be on equal footing once more. Thinking of this, Qin Yu took a deep breath. He lightly said, "There is no need for jokes. I came here today to ask Lord Dragon Sage for help." Chapter 1307. "I'm not joking," Long Sheng muttered in a low voice, his face full of sorrow and regret. The person who sold the peaches was too lucky. Alas, say it, say it. I will do my best to complete the task that Miss Ninth instructed me to do. Qin Yu pretended not to hear the first part and cupped his hands together. "Many thanks, Lord Dragon Sage." Without beating around the bush, he went straight to the point. "May I ask, Lord Dragon Sage, have you heard of the two names Hidden Pearl or Exploring the Sea?" Long Sheng shook his head. "I've never heard of it, but this name sounds like it has something to do with my Eastern Sea." As he spoke, he glanced at Zhang Xian. Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows. But thinking about it, how could someone of the Dragon Saint's status know the names of two juniors? According to what I know, they are indeed people from the East Sea, and they seem to have some background. They call the almighty being of their family an old ancestor. Those who are qualified to be called ancestors were definitely not ordinary. Embarrassment flashed across Long Sheng's face for a brief moment before he coughed lightly. If that's the case, then this king might have guessed a few things. The Eastern Sea is too big. It's inevitable that there will be some heretics. After thinking for a while, he continued, "If Miss Ninth isn't in a hurry, you can rest for the time being. I'll find someone to ask, and I'll be able to confirm it. It's urgent." Long Sheng paused for a moment. "That's fine too. I'll have to ask Miss Ninth to wait here for a moment." As he spoke, he rapped his fingers on the chair, producing a metallic sound. Outside the study, the old tortoise's respectful voice rang out. "What are your orders?" "Summon black armor." Yes, obviously, old tortoise knew Long Sheng's temperament very well. If he called for help before the guests were properly settled, it must be an urgent matter. After using the transportation formation, Black Armor quickly pushed the door open and entered. "Greetings, Lord Dragon Sage." He paused for a moment before he continued, "Greetings, Miss Ninth." His heart was filled with emotions. Not too long ago, he had the qualifications to stand on the same arena as Chinyu. But now there were people from two completely different worlds, and they couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. Long Sheng waved his hand. "Get up. Black Armor, I have something to ask you. Have you ever heard of the names Hidden Pearl and Exploring the Sea?" Black Armor cupped his hands together. "Reporting to Dragon Sage, Tanhai is a general under Black Turtle in the Scarlet Peak Strait. I once fought with him. But as for the other name, I have never heard of him." Qin Yu's eyes brightened. Hidden Pearl and Exploring Sea came from the same place. Finding one was enough. He met the Dragon Sage's eyes and nodded. "Miss Ninth is here to look for these two people. This matter is a secret, so don't leak anything." After Long Sheng instructed, he turned around and explained, "Black Armor has been stationed in the Crimson Peak Strait all these years, so he's the most familiar with that place. Mr. Ninth, if you have any questions, feel free to ask." Chinyu said, "Black Armor, can you give me an overview of the Scarlet Summit Strait?" Black Armor glanced at Long Sheng, coughed, and waved his hand, saying, "Since Miss Ninth has asked, you must answer truthfully. Do not hide anything." "Yes, this subordinate understands." Black Armor bowed. "Reporting to Mr. Ninth, the Scarlet Summit Strait is located in the extreme north of the East Sea. It is covered in snow and ice, and its master is a 10,000-year-old black turtle. Its strength is tyrannical, and it has never obeyed the control of the Dragon Palace. It is the largest rebel force in the East Sea, and there are many vicious deep-sea creatures gathered under its command." Speaking truthfully was speaking the truth, but he still had to embellish it a little. Did he really have to directly tell Chinyu that this black turtle was incomparably powerful, and that his lord Long Sheng had tried to subjugate it again and again without being able to gain the slightest bit of advantage? Thus, he simply tacitly agreed that the Scarlet Summit Strait status was the same as a country within the East Sea. Ahem, even though that was what he meant now, at least it sounded better. Qin, you could certainly understand what he meant. If the Eastern Sea Dragon Sage was helpless against this black turtle old ancestor, then his strength was inevitably terrifying. His eyes flashed. He asked, "Has there been any unusual movements in the Scarlet Summit Strait recently?" Black Armor shook his head. "There's no obvious abnormality." He paused and hesitated for a moment. "But not long ago, there seemed to be a turbulence in the Scarlet Summit Strait, causing many deaths and injuries. But the movement soon disappeared, and it didn't cause too much of a change. But after that, the defense system of the Scarlet Summit Strait has obviously become much stricter." Chinyu instantly thought of Hidden Pearl. This turbulence and the strengthening of the defense system might be related to her escape. He also asked about the exploration of the sea, and after confirming that it was the same person, he was more confident. Seeing that Chinyu didn't ask any more questions, the Eastern Sea Dragon Sage waved his hand and said, "Black Armor, you can leave first. Don't leave the Dragon Palace for the time being." "Yes, this subordinate will take his leave." Black Armor bowed and left. Chinyu looked at the Dragon Sage. "Is this the black turtle old ancestor?" The Dragon Sage shook his head. "It's not a true saint, but its strength is very tyrannical, not much weaker than a true saint. More importantly, its turtle shell." At this point, the Dragon Sage sighed, his eyes extremely complex. It's too hard. To be able to make a dignified, true saint sigh with emotion, although he hadn't personally experienced it, he could still approximate how hard this turtle shell was. Chinyu thought to himself that it was fine. He had hidden his identity when he came to the East Sea, and besides the Dragon Sage father and daughter pair, only his two trusted subordinates knew of his identity. Otherwise, if news of him were to be discovered, there might be other changes. After all, old ancestor Black Turtle's consciousness had once descended into Hidden Pearl's body. Chinyu wasn't sure whether or not he knew anything. Although he didn't know what problems Hidden Pearl was facing, just based on what he had done before, Qin Yu felt that he should pay a visit. After thinking for a moment, Qin Yu cupped his hands across his chest. Lord Dragon Sage, I must make a trip to the Scarlet Summit Strait. The real show had finally arrived. With Qin Yu's current status, he had changed his appearance and come to the East Sea. Was it really just to look for someone? Humph humph. Whoever believed that was an idiot. Although he didn't know how that damned black turtle had managed to provoke this little evil star in front of him, that wasn't important. What was important was that their Lord Dragon Sage, after silently enduring for so many years, had finally found a chance to take revenge for his broken teeth. A sharp light shined in the depths of his eyes. Lord Dragon Sage leaned forward. Mr. Ninth, forgive me for being presumptuous, but what about you and that black turtle in the Scarlet Summit Strait? Qin Yu said, We've never met. Dragon Sage's eyes widened, a bit disappointed. He hadn't even met before. So how could there be enmity between them? Even if there was a problem, it shouldn't be too big. This was a bit different from what he had imagined. It seemed that wanting to borrow a knife to kill someone wasn't so simple. Or could it be that this brat Qin Yu had realized something and was deliberately hiding it so he could raise the price? Looking at him carefully, it didn't seem like it. At the very least, when Qin Yu said, We've never met, Dragon Sage was sure that he wasn't lying. Cough, I see. It wasn't difficult to guess Dragon Sage's thoughts. Qin Yu thought for a moment and said, I am familiar with the East Sea Dragon Palace, and I am also indebted to Lord Dragon Sage for looking after me in the past. If possible, I would naturally stand on the side of the Dragon Palace. However, there are some things that I haven't confirmed yet, so it's not good for me to say anything. How about this? After I enter the Scarlet Summit Strait, I will act according to the circumstances. I ask Lord Dragon Sage to give me a way to contact you. Looking at his current attitude, this was the only way. Dragon Sage took out a dragon scale and said, When Mr. Ninth needs it, you can find me through this. Qin Yu received it and stood up. If that's the case, then Qin Yu won't bother you any longer. He paused for a moment and said, The Scarlet Summit Strait is heavily guarded. In order to avoid being discovered, I'm afraid I will need Black Armor's help. Dragon Sage said, No problem. I will give the order. Everything will be in accordance with Mr. Ninth's arrangements. Thank you, Lord Dragon Sage. Farewell. Qin Yu turned and left, but as he turned around, he completed his transformation. Lord Dragon Sage watched everything unfold in front of him. The entire process seemed like a natural growth of flesh and skin, without the slightest abnormality. In other words, even though he had seen Qin Yu transform twice in a row, Dragon Sage still couldn't find any flaws. This was an extremely sad thing. The Peach Garden had a peach wood portal, while the East Sea had a magical giant shell, and it was a living creature. After he followed Black Armor into it, the space fluctuated, and when he stepped out again, he was already at the northernmost part of the East Sea. This was a world covered in ice and snow. After breaking out of the sea, all he could see was white. The air temperature was terrifyingly low, and strong winds constantly whistled, sweeping up large pieces of snow, making crackling sounds as they hit the ground. The tents of the East Sea Dragon Palace were built in this world of ice and snow. Black Armor said respectfully, Mister, please rest for a moment. I will arrange everything soon. Qin Yu nodded casually and was brought into an exquisite and warm tent. After Black Armor gave some detailed instructions, he bowed and left. The 2C race maid secretly looked at Qin Yu from time to time, their eyes filled with awe and curiosity. Clearly, they wanted to know who this divine being was that could make Lord Black Armor treat him so seriously. Probably because he had formed a body of rules. Qin Yu was still Qin Yu, but he was a bit more charismatic than before. This had nothing to do with his appearance. Rather, it was a feeling that came from his flesh and bone marrow, a feeling that could only be sensed but couldn't be described. It had an inexplicable attraction to other beings, and it didn't distinguish between the opposite sex and the same sex. Thus, even though he had transformed, this feeling still existed. It made people subconsciously feel a bit closer to him. It was also because of this that the two sea race maids dared to secretly look at him. If it were any other honored guest, they wouldn't have dared to be so presumptuous. Qin Yu was well aware of this, but he pretended not to notice. Luckily, Black Armor was fast and returned before Qin Yu became impatient. "Mister, everything has been arranged." Qin Yu stood up. "Let's go." Not long after, a small-scale conflict erupted between the East Sea Dragon Palace's station and the patrolling sea folk of the Scarlet Peak Strait. The entire process didn't take long. After around an hour, things calmed down. Both sides left behind several corpses, and the matter came to an end. This kind of conflict was very common here. It would happen every few days, and neither side cared about it. Those bastards from the East Sea Dragon Palace, they were lucky this time to run away. "Next time, we will cut off their heads. We killed 2 more, so that's an advantage. Let's go back and celebrate. Ha ha ha, I don't like these dogs of the Dragon Palace. Next time we have a chance, we will kill 2 more. Beneath the sea, on a strange ship, a group of sea folk who had just retreated from the battlefield laughed. Although many of them were wounded, their morale was very high. There was nothing they could do. Although the black turtle old ancestor was powerful, and the dragon sage couldn't do anything to him, he was still suppressed and could only hide in the Scarlet Peak Strait. In terms of overall strength, they couldn't compare with the Dragon Palace. Thus, in these past years of conflicts, the Scarlet Peak Strait had mostly suffered losses. This time they had counterattacked and killed 2 more. This group of sea folk would more or less receive some rewards, so everyone was naturally excited. As they spoke, a half-human, half-crab man patted the sea folk beside him. "Musher, you helped me block a sword attack today. I will remember it. Tonight, I will treat you to a drink. Don't go home until you're drunk." The member of the sea race who was called Wooden Turtle nodded with a smile. He was a man of few words, and the other members of the sea race did not mind him. As they spoke, the topic of their conversation began to change, and a burst of strange laughter erupted. Thus, no one noticed that the depths of this sea folk called Musher's eyes were always calm and indifferent, without the slightest ripple.